Welcome to the Purple Political Breakdown. You can't have absolute freedom. You really can't have absolute safety. Both of them leads to ruin. There's a big nuance on how both should be kind of valued based on the perspective and situation you are in. People should be allowed to be the individuals they are and express their own individual freedom, but don't discount the safety that we all want for ourselves, for our kids, which is probably the most important part, the safety of our kids, and so they can live their own freedom as they grow up. So we're gonna see how that keeps on going, and keep your eyes open and your ears open as well for potential measures that try to disguise them as safety measures, but are potentially ways to take away the freedoms that we're talking about. Do you want a great website like this? This is my podcast website where I direct the audience to come to watch the content, listen to the content, read the blogs, and much, much more. If you want to have your own customizable podcast website, then join my affiliate link in my description to sign up for something called Podpage, and they can help you customize an easy podcast website for your personal podcast. Sign up to get a discount now. Again, use the link in my description to join Podpage now. Are you enjoying today's podcast episode? I really hope you do. And I really hope you enjoy the fact that I have an amazing guest talking with me and having this great discussion. If you, as an individual, personally have your own podcast and maybe you want to have great guests on your podcast as well, I got a deal for you. In my description, there is a link to something called Podmatch. Make sure to join that link through my affiliate link so you can sign up to get matched up with other podcast hosts and podcast guests, so you make sure you are never missing an episode without a productive guest to have an amazing conversation with. Podmatch is similar to any other kind of matching site for the most part, and it's super easy to use. Just $6 a month and you can have a guest for each and every podcast episode that is tailored to your specific topic. So again, join the link in my description and join Podmatch now. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is episode number 39 of the Purple Political Breakdown, and we're back at it again. It's just me, your boy, your co-host, or your host, Riddell Lewis, and my co-host. He's going to be showing up momentarily. He's having technical difficulties, but we're going to be talking about freedom versus safety, and here he is.
Hello.
What's good? What's good, Jonathan?
Sorry, I don't know what was going on, but nothing on my computer would connect or turn on. So,
Hey, it'd be like that. You already know I've had technical difficulties. So, at least you found out before, the show started. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But yeah, today we're gonna be talking about freedom versus, I meant to say safety, not equality. So freedom versus safety.
That makes a whole lot more sense. I was like, this is about to be an interesting conversation because I have no idea what we're talking about.
I read. I was like, oh, why did I put equality? That's the wrong word. To kind of give a little kind of context on what the episode was originally going to be about. Originally, I was thinking about talking about human rights for women in Iran, but I just thought that topic is a little outside of like the brand as of right now. I eventually want to dive into international politics, but I want to start off with domestic, fix America's problems. Not saying we will, it's possible, but at the very least touch upon a lot of America's issues, find solutions, and then diving into the more international area will come later. So I thought it best to cancel that show for a different time, which is why we haven't done a Ukraine versus Russia episode either, or a China versus US episode. So just those are things that will come later on. At the very least, the Ukraine and Russia thing is a lot more American involved. So that's a conversation for another time. But with that said, we're going to be talking about freedom versus safety, as I said prior. This is a very interesting conversation because this is kind of like very, very contentious on should people have more freedom or more safety. But like, if in turn of having more safety, that would mean like other people would have to instill more rules and restrictions. So we'll dive into all of that, of course. And before we do that, we're going to do a what you need to know. What is going on? A few things that I saw as of the last couple days that has been announced in terms of daily news or world news, I guess. There was an assassination plot on Zelensky. Allegedly, they say it's by the Russians. He is okay, and the woman that tried to do it is arrested. Nearly 100 people have been arrested in the US and Australia as part of a dark web child abuse investigation. 13 children have been rescued. From what I saw, there's like a statistic that about like 80% of the dark web is, stuff relating to like child porn and all these other very negative actions. So that's why it's so hard to crack down on a lot of these things, is what the article said. The U.S. Supreme Court temporarily reinstates federal regulations of ghost guns, which are firearms that have no serial number and can be homemade. And the last one, U.S. aid worker and her daughter were freed after being kidnapped in Haiti while on ministry duty. So a lot of interesting news going on currently. What do you think about all of that, Jonathan?
I think it's amazing that we're catching those people on the dark web. It's good work. I would add one thing. It seems that one of our states is on fire. Hawaii is like burning. I
Yeah.
guess. I guess there's that as well. Which is sad, and thoughts and prayers, and hopefully some serious aid goes out to there. But I think I hadn't heard about the assassination attempt of Zelensky. Um, that's an interesting one, but I particularly noticed all that stuff with the dark web and that we're catching those people. I think that's good work.
Yeah, that's I 100% agree. It's definitely good work. It's kind of funny considering that, that came out. Obviously, it's very important, but there's a lot of like controversy around the movie Sounds of Freedom.
Hmm.
Um, because people are saying things like, "Hey, this is all BS." That's untrue. It's very weird that everything is becoming political, but innately, to be fair, I haven't seen the movie, but from my understanding, it's trying to raise awareness in terms of child abductions, which should be a pretty universal. Hey,
Hmm.
man, we don't want that to happen. Uh, so with that said, it's a good thing we have this stuff. I think raising awareness of it is very important. People don't realize how like messed up the internet can be with the dark web and the deep web. I actually
Hmm.
found it out about it by chance. I think I was a senior in high school and I had nothing to do because I was a junior in high school and I had nothing to do because I moved away from my friends. So now I'm far away from them and all I have to do is stay inside the house, right? So I was just scrolling through YouTube and I by chance found out about the dark web and deep web. And when you learn about that at a young age, you get very skeptical, very skeptical about people potentially hacking you and coming to your doorstep to kidnap you. It's a depressing place. I'm sure your work deals with a lot of it, right?
It can more so my work at the lab probably. Because it had to do a lot with police officers peddling photos and stuff on such devices and um locations on the web, I should say. So yeah, I encountered it. I don't mess around with that kind of stuff just as a prudential matter. Um, but yeah, the world is a nasty place out there. But that movie is a fantastic movie. The Sound of Freedom. It's so funny to see the kind of anti campaigns like who can be opposed to that kind of movie and them call I believe it was like the Daily Beast or it might have even actually been the Guardian that called it a QAnon adjacent movie. because it was just a conspiracy theory. It's like,
Oh
no,
yeah,
this
I heard
stuff
about
is,
the
yeah,
QAnon, but like,
yeah. It's like, what does that have anything to do with it? It's true stories. All of it's real. They show the footage at the end of like the actual body cam footage and stuff from the actual events.
yeah, it's so dawning to me how like the left and right have switched their viewpoints on like the establishment. You
Yeah,
know,
isn't it?
the left is now very much protecting them, always being a skeptic, whereas the right's like, nah, all of them are bad. It's from my understanding, like back in the day, it always seemed like the left was like, hey man, they all suck, and the right was
Yeah,
like,
fight
nah,
against the
they're all
man.
good.
Yeah.
It's so weird how much it changed, and it's whether you believe it or not, it might be largely in part due to Donald Trump. Like it literally might be
Well, this is
him.
actually, yeah, I think that's true. I think, I mean, we all know the infamous debate where it's like, oh, you took part in those same tax breaks. And Donald Trump goes, yeah, darn right I did, but you did too. We all did. We all do it. And if you want it to change, change the tax code. So I think that's true. I think the Donald Trump presidency really shifted the Republican Party. And I think that's one thing that Paul, I believe when we were talking this, criticized Trump and said he didn't do anything, and he's been a bad influence on the Republican Party. But I don't really take that approach. He pretty much created a new Republican Party, a new conservative front, um, and that's not a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. It made us way more socially conservative. I think it made all conservatives much more socially conservative, and I think it's just like a new kind of a new party in many ways and fundamentally, and you can see this in all of the um, old Republicans that kind of maintain in essence, just a slightly more fiscally conservative liberals. They kind of are slowly dwindling and falling away because the real conservatives don't really claim them anymore, and so they're kind of falling by the wayside. But I definitely think that was due, in large part, to Donald Trump because he just changed everything.
Yeah, I've had the conversation. I think it was yesterday where I went on someone's platform and I was talking, and we're talking about the left and they're struggling. And one of the things that I pointed out is like they have no objective values to adhere to, and they're kind of well, I think a lot of people on the left realize this is that they're kind of like devouring each other, like themselves. Like
Hmm.
they, because of these crazy, not concrete values, that no one knows where they truly lie in terms of their own morality. And now with kind of this switch where it's like, okay, everything about you is supposed to be the individual liberty, but you're also very much advocating for establishment based principles at the same time. It
Yeah.
it doesn't click. There's a disconnect on what the left is, and fortunately, like the way they're gonna have to win moving forward until they kind of fix themselves is hoping more candidates like Biden, in my opinion, that are center left-ish, they're gonna have to be the prime candidates to vote
Uh,
in
I
because
don't think Biden's very center left. I think he's a very radical president.
I think he's as center left you can get as a politician. I think for
Well, I guess I
the
should
current
amend my statement.
standard
You're correct.
of what is left and right, I think he's center left.
I'll amend my statement. His presidency is one of the most radical leftist His White House is one of the most radical left it's ever been. I mean, we had them putting up the progressive militant pride flag in the center of the White House, inviting that on the White House lawn, all the during Pride, where the lady literally showed her breasts on the camera.
Yeah, that was
And
crazy. Not gonna
yeah,
lie.
that is endorsement by the White House staff. That is endorsed by Biden's White House. He's a very radical president.
I
Well,
think
administration.
that is probably not going to change anytime soon, but they won't be able to get anybody voted in unless they're like Biden in terms of um
I
his kind
do
of
understand what
positions.
you mean, though. I do understand what you mean because he himself attempts to portray himself as center left. He tries to portray himself as a. I mean, that's what he campaigned on, a return to normal. Um, that I don't think that has proved to be true though.
It's going to be interesting to see with the candidates coming up, because RFK, I don't really know. Like, I think technically you probably could maybe say center left, but he has positions that a lot of the people on the left would deem like very right in terms of certain things. And then he has we've talked about it before, he has very traditional democratic positions too, but the left right now is all over the place. So that's why he's in a weird position where
Mhm.
you don't know
Yeah,
exactly where he's at.
the left has um like I think you put it really nicely. They have no like central motivating story that motivates the way that they perceive reality because they're so radically individualist. And of course, when you make your platform individualism, then what happens when my interests conflict your interests? Then what's going to happen? Who's going to win that? And I think they try to push so many different things at the same time. They have you know, too many pies in the oven. They're trying to spin so many plates at the same
Yeah.
time that it all come crashing down. Because it's just it's like the funny stories where um the whole victim hierarchy comes into play. Like it's so confusing trying to figure out like who beats like a black trans woman versus a straight white female versus a straight white black female versus a trans non-identifying Muslim man who converted to Judaism and then converted back. Like all these crazy like like who would they've put so much confusion out there and saying we care about all of these people equally, but this one's the most important for this month, but this one's the most important for that month, and this month is this person's, and then they conflict so many things altogether that everyone's just kind of confused about what's going on and who are the protected classes, who are not the protected classes, who's important, who's not important. And when you try to make physical attributes the primary substance of somebody, then everybody else is kind of just upset by that. And when you make your platforms about getting reparations for those physical attributes of somebody, then it's not really going to go anywhere because there'll always be somebody with a greater level of victimhood. There'll always be somebody who can get out of that greater level of victimhood as well. And I think that's one of the primary issues with the Democratic platform right now is it's so like I think it was Dan Crenshaw who pointed this out. And he's kind of fallen out of favor for some reason. I don't know why, but because he seems by all measures a pretty solid guy. But he pointed out he was on a podcast and he was asked like what he thinks about the Democrats, and he said they're like I forget the exact word, but essentially overly empathetic. They're pathologically empathetic. That's what it is. And
Hmm.
empathy is by nature bearing with somebody in their suffering, right? That's the definition of empathy. What it is not is getting people out of their misery. It's just we will be miserable with you. And that's I think one of the issues is they don't really have a good measure. It's just identifying that somebody is suffering and then suffering with them. That is what empathy is. And they always say that the conservatives are the big bag meanies and we're the empathetic party. Yeah, you are empathetic, but unfortunately empathy doesn't really get people out of situations.
Yeah, there's a lot to say in terms of the left as of right now, and I do respect Paul because
Mhm.
he wants to
Of
get rid
course.
of all the crazy like far left progressives, and
Yes.
it's a good idea. I mean, to be honest, they kind of consolidate their vision a little bit more concretely, because with someone like Paul, we have an understanding like where your values lie and where
Mhm.
it comes from, and another thing that
Yes.
I mentioned on the other episode is like for him, for him, not only does he has a position that is like adherent to caring about people, but he also is not trying to tear down all the other institutions like the
Mhm.
police department, like the military and stuff like that. So you want everything to crumble. You don't want to be part of anything, and you're just speaking based off like abstract ideals and not really being part of anything. So
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of problems with the left, but I'm sure we'll have a more in-depth conversation about that a different time. With that said, we're gonna dive into the subtopic, and I was thinking of doing one of two subtopics. I was gonna like, should I do the social subtopic where about the rumor about little Tay dying, and then apparently she's not dead. It was very, very strange, but I
I
think
don't know
I'm
who
gonna
that
go.
is.
It's like no, we won't go into it. We'll do the other one because I'm curious of what you're answering. So this is also from a TV show. It raised a very interesting scenario. Same TV show, but a different scenario. So the scenario is that there are two individuals. One individual is a 29-year-old woman. The other individual is a 17-year-old boy. Now, in the show, what happened is that the 17-year-old boy did not tell the 29-year-old woman that he was 17. They had sex, she got pregnant, and then obviously she was pissed, and now, they have a baby together. Now, when you look at it, when you take a step back, it's like 17, and you look at the values of what is America, people would say anytime you're under age 18, this is pedophilia, pedophile, you're a pedophile, this is pedophilia, this is horrible. But I also looked up the age of consent in Texas, and it said 16. So that's where the show is based at, in Texas. So my question is, when you have a
She was
situation,
29 in that. I think I saw that clip. She
what
was
clip?
29 in that. That the clip of that episode. You said it's from the same show.
Yeah,
The
the
young
show, she's
gentleman.
29 in the show, and he's 17 in the show. And they
She
had,
did not look 29.
I mean, she's probably older than 29.
Really? The actress?
They're probably both older. She was back in the day when Hannah Montana exists. She was on Hannah
Oh, really?
Montana.
I'd
If
never seen
if
that
we're
show
talking about
before.
the same person,
The
so
blonde girl.
yeah, the blonde girl, she was on Hannah Montana.
I've never seen that show.
Oh my goodness, childhood ruined. But with that said, there's a very interesting moral dilemma because, in all intents and purposes, anybody just given the ages would condemn the person. But then, would you also accept the person, considering the 17-year-old is being a great dad, being there for the woman? At that point, as the 29-year-old, would you go like, you know what? Even though technically it's legal, but morally it's condemnable across the country, but he's being such a great dad. At that point, is it okay to accept him despite his age? And the situation obviously is a very heartwarming in a sense, especially considering he's the younger guy. But then you also, the next part of the question, if you switch their genders and it's a 29-year-old man and a 17-year-old woman, you could imagine the backlash. So that's why I thought the scenario is so interesting. So what do you think about that when you have a situation like, because that could
I
exist?
think it's I think it's very telling of our age that I mean, if I remember correctly, right? Do they end up getting married?
He proposed and she said yes in like the last episode of the season.
Oh, the show's still going on.
I believe so. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Well, I had seen that clip had come across my feed and I saw it. I hadn't realized that he was so young and she was so old. I just thought it was like an older woman. Um, but because she still looks pretty young. But I think it's very telling of the age that we live in that it is kind of a mold up. Like obviously he should get married to her because he got her pregnant and they should get married. Um, but it's also interesting that the dichotomy between if it was the other way around, he would be hung and probably set up in the city square as like a message to all the people. And that's probably because of um all the hashtag Me Too movement and all that sort of thing has really created a big awareness of this, but it's never really been the case that that's been taboo the other way around. Like I think Joe Rogan was talking about this at one point. Like in every story where it's like the teacher is a guy and the young student is a girl, and the, or yeah, the teacher is a guy, the young student is a boy or a girl. It's always a tragic thing when they hook up because obviously the guy was being a little bit promiscuous and probably it wasn't consensual. They kind of assume automatically that it wasn't consensual. But the other way around, that's not the case. If it's like the hot teacher girl and the guy, the young student in high school, gets with the girl, it's never really like people really don't care that much. They all like, oh, that guy, he must be a real player if he can get the teacher. And I think that um, it's just a weird situation that obviously both people should abstain from that. And you shouldn't do things that are degrading like that in the first place. But, I think if the young man, the 17-year-old in this, if he can provide a good life, if he can, then he should. And it shouldn't be, um, you have to deal with the consequences of your actions. And I think that's what it comes down to. I think he has an obligation to attempt to make it work because they both partook. I think it's
Yeah,
one thing. Oh, go ahead.
yeah, I definitely agree that there's like a double standard, but at the same time, I do think double standards are needed. I'm not one of those people who believe that, you know, regardless of any situation, man or woman, you should be treated the same. I'm not under that same belief system personally, based on my understanding of men and my understanding of women, especially if like they're the same age. My
Whoa,
thing fell out of my
you glass
glasses.
lens.
It just came right out. But so I'm okay with the double standard, and I think a lot of it comes from, oh shit, I broke it. Okay, RP my blue light black glasses. They're fake anyway. I don't need them.
Now,
We're going
these
with
are
the
blue
black.
light glasses too.
Yeah, I don't need them, but it makes me look smarter. Uh,
Exactly.
but with what I was saying, I definitely believe a double standard is needed because I understand where it comes from. Obviously, when it comes to a man having power and taking advantage of a younger woman, at the end of the day, especially for a woman, it's like much more dire if they're taking advantage of, because usually they're going to be generally weaker, generally if they're taken advantage of, it's much more damaging, especially if they get pregnant. And obviously
Mhm,
when it comes to
mhm.
rape, that's one of the most horrible things you could do to another person. So the double standard, I understand. I definitely feel for it. And for me, not being a saint like Jonathan, like if I had a friend and he's a guy and he screwed around with a teacher, I probably wouldn't care either. And I think I know examples of that happening in my high school. And I would have been like,
Right.
damn, you're lucky, bro. That's probably what I would have said. And then if it was a girl, I'd be like, what the hell are you doing? So it's it's a definitely a tough situation. And
I think
go ahead.
um I agree. It is a sticky situation, but I think um men bear a lot of responsibility that women do not. But I think we were intended to bear the responsibility. Um, we're supposed to be a little bit more, um, I think, just inherently logical. I think we're supposed to be a little bit more reasonable. Women are far more empathetic. They're far more emotional. That's just a fact. On average, there's always exceptions. Always. Um, differences and temperament um and personality, but I think men are supposed to be kind of the standard bearers. We're supposed to be protectors and providers for the family. And so, when you're in a relationship with somebody, you're supposed to protect them in all ways. I think, me and my girlfriend, I think we both have an obligation to purity, but I think I have a little bit more of an obligation to ensure that we remain pure in this stage of our relationship and in all future stages of the relationship. And so when it comes down to this kind of situation, I think this is one of the problems with your loathing of the red pill communities, or rightful loathing, I think. Because the more I've kind of listened, the more I kind of agree with your stance that these people do not, they're supposed to be these ultra trad conservative people, but I don't think they really are, because they get that, like, a woman's like, one of the things they always talk about is a woman's purity, and how if a guy runs through a bunch of girls, that's okay, but if the girl gets run through a bunch of times, it's not okay. I think you're right in the aspect that double standards are um sometimes necessary. Sometimes it's okay to
Yeah,
be to have a
sometimes.
little bit of a double standard. But in that particular instance, I don't think it's true. Because, and this is something that is pointed out, I believe, by Socrates, right? And one of the issues with our understanding of sex is this, is that what makes sex okay is consent, and consent alone. That's not true. There are many things that are important when it comes to sex, but one of the things when it comes to the concept of rape, because this is kind of what the topic is about, is like, if it was, if the gender roles were reversed, it would have been considered rape. But what these red pillars do is they say the only guilty party here is the woman, because the woman is simply being seduced by a man. And this is what Andrew Tate says over and over again. He says, I seduced these women to F them. And it's very interesting, and it's very notable and worthy of observation that he never says the words make love or have sex. He says F them. That's a very visceral thing. That's a very base, and it's a very vulgar term, as opposed to make love with the woman, have sex, or all those sorts of things. You know, the Bible says, and Adam knew his wife, all that sort of thing. But it's an important distinction. But the most important thing is that seduction in the ancient world, in the classic world, and in the classic sense, is a much worse crime. It is much worse to seduce a woman than it is to simply rape them. And this is the reason. This is going to be a very clickbaity thing. Seduction is both a rape of the soul and the body. Rape is just the rape of the body. And there's a distinction there, because when you seduce somebody, the context of it is the man is seducing the woman because he doesn't really care about her. He simply wants to F her. He doesn't even want to make love with her. He just wants to have her physically, and that's it. And so to do it, he seduces her. He manipulates her emotions and essentially rapes her soul as well as her body. And this is one of the things that's very important when we're noting these kind of situations. And I think is one of the issues with the red pill community, is the guys think it's totally okay to seduce the woman, because if the woman gives in, then she consents, and that's okay then. But it's really not. It's very bad.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I've talked about my criticism of the red pill quite a bit, especially from the new information that we learn from people like Andrew Tate and how horrible of a person he really is. And the last thing I'm going to say about this topic, in terms of my position regarding, you know, the teacher thing, I think the biggest thing for me when it comes to these scenarios is the power dynamic. And innately, my assumption, at the very least from the people I know, because obviously the people I know are usually pretty fit, pretty strong masculine men, is the best way I'm going to put that way. And if they were to seduce a teacher, more than likely, even though the teacher's older, the when you take away titles and we take away age, I think it's very clear who would have the power dynamic, which is why I don't see it nearly as bad. Whereas almost in every situation I see a teacher and a student, the power dynamic is very obvious, where the teacher has even more than he already had. And obviously being older is even more. So once that gets skewed, I think it's almost entirely wrong. I don't know many scenarios where there's going to be a student, female student, who's going to be in terms of the power dynamic is going to just trump the teacher, unless she's like super ultra rich and is just like blackmailing this teacher to do everything she wants. Then maybe, but that's just like a fantasy scenario for some of y'all. So I guess that's the biggest difference for me when it comes down to these scenarios. And a lot of the things that Jonathan said, I agree with when it comes to seduction and rape. And double standards are very minimal in terms of when they should be okayed. Because innately, I think a lot of people should be treated relatively equally to an extent. Although I don't think values are all the same, but treatment should be all the same for the most part. So that's a little different. But let's dive into the topic at hand because we're talking about a lot of very interesting things. We're going to dive into a very interesting argument in terms of freedom versus safety. Now, the reason why this conversation is so important, and I thought about it like a few days ago on the idea of a utopia versus like an anarchy system, right? A place of no rules. Those are if you go the extremes. The utopia is absolute safety. It's a place where there's strict rules that every single person must follow every single day of their lives, but by following said rules, they will have a peaceful, safe life and they will have no problems for their entire life. And the alternative is absolute freedom, which would be anarchy, but there will be no one telling you what to do, no system or restriction or rule put upon you, and you get to act based off your will and your will alone. And that is definitely part of a lot of the contention in current American society because you have people who want to give the government more control, and then you have other people who want to give the government less control, put the power in the hands of the people. So this is a very interesting conversation. But to start off, well, what do you think about freedom versus safety? What do you think is more important?
I think freedom is a very important um is one of the most important things that we have. I think anarchy is every bit as foolish. Like a total anarchy, I think is foolish because I think you'll know what I say. What freedom means and what our founding fathers meant it to mean is the freedom to do what you ought to do, and we should have that freedom above all things. Um, that's what the Declaration of Independence was about. That's what we put in our Constitution, in our Bill of Rights. Is freedom. Um, I think safety is a natural thing to want, but it's not a primary thing because you will never make the world an actual safe place for everyone. Um, we ate the fruit, as Ivan says in in the Brothers Karamazov. They ate the fruit, so to hell with them. He's talking about adults, but kids are still innocent. And he was making that argument against God, is the existence of pain and suffering in the world. We will never make the world an entirely safe place. That's
Why
just
is that?
it's because it's in our nature. It's our nature to fall apart, to crumble, to destroy. It's also the nature of our enemy. Because if you're like me and you believe in God, then you also believe in the devil, and the devil's role is to seek, kill, and destroy. He is described as a prowling lion seeking whom he may devour. Um, and that's a reality. It's a reality everywhere that when you try, I mean, it's what Benjamin Franklin is very infamously said. Those who, I think I pulled it up. Yeah, those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. Um, it's a foolishness to give away your liberty for a little bit of safety. And he's talking, of course, about the government. Those who are willing to give up essential liberty, um, I believe he said, yeah, essential liberty for a little bit of safety, will never get that liberty back. But he won't be safe for very long either. Because one of the things we know, if we look at the Soviet Union, in which they did that sort of thing, they sold a little essential liberty for some safety. Eventually, that system will collapse and you will lose all of your safety. Um, I think I think utopias can't exist. And I actually have a little bit of a thought experiment for you, if you care, because this is actually, I like a lot that you chose this topic because I've been like kind of in the back of my mind and a little bit on paper. I started working on like a short story that I really have no idea where it's going to go, but it's a very interesting thought experiment that I kind of was playing out with, and it turned into a story. So imagine year 2185 or whatever. And there's a procedure that you can undergo. And if you undergo this procedure, then you will know the exact date to which you will die. You go to the hospital, they give you this procedure, you're sedated, and then you end up back in your house. And a couple of days later, you get a note, you get a letter from the doctor. And enclosed in it is the date in which you will die, and then a pill at the bottom. And if you take the pill, then all of the effects of this procedure will take hold, and you will know the exact date and time that you will die, because not only will you be perfectly physically healthy, you'll never age another day, but you'll also be taken to this particular city. Um, and in this city, there can be no accidents, there can be no maladies, because even your mind is altered to ensure that you don't even partake in riskier behavior. And so it is literally the perfect utopia and the perfect safety. Or you can choose to stay on the outside and you can risk death, you can risk life, but you also are under no compulsion. Which do you choose?
So for me in this scenario, I would choose the latter. Now I would have to ask, in terms of the outside city, is it just still normal society or is
Completely
it
normal.
lesser? Just totally
It's
normal.
complete it's a complete it's just like today, but all of the technological advancement has only taken place in this particular, because it's a particular doctor who discovered this cure, and he created this city. And so if you pay the millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars or whatever it is, you can get that procedure and you can go live inside his city, and it's literally paradise on earth. But you're kind of under this forced compulsion to remain safe.
Yeah, so for me, I definitely would pick the latter in terms of not taking the pill, not going to the city, not going to the utopia, because very similar to Jonathan here, I value the ability to, have freedom of thought, freedom of individuality. And I do think that's a very important function of being who you are. I mean, at the end of the day, if your mind is not able to function as it usually would, at that point you are losing yourself or becoming a completely different person. And that's what I believe. So in this situation, if you did said thing, you wouldn't be who you are, you would be a different person, although safer. But it really depends on your value of individuality, because I can see a lot of people who have no value of self that would take the pill. They value life, they value, you know, no worries, no risks, no depression, which is understandable because a lot of people in American society are struggling with said things. But if you do value your own mindset, you as an individual, your ability to grow and prosper in whatever function that you believe is fit, then it would make sense for you to just not take the pill and live as you are. So yeah, that's probably where I would go.
Yeah, I think because here's the problem with a utopia is the very fact that we talked about it. It is the forced compulsion, because people inherently want to take risks. I think this is actually one of the problems with the modern church. Is we don't really offer people a good story, because nobody wants to be told that all of a sudden every single problem they have will go away if you do X, Y, and Z. Because especially for men, we want a little bit of an adventure. We want the risks, we want the struggles, and we want that just inherently. So many people, I think, will say that no, they want all of their problems to go away. But as soon as all of their problems go away, then people are miserable. Like, why do retired people die, especially retired men, especially like police officers or people who lived adventurous and active lives? As soon as they retire, they either immediately get out of retirement or they croak, because they're not built, especially after like a very actively lived life. They're not built for ease. We're not built for um, just apathy. And I think that's one of the things that happens, especially with um, things like communism and socialism, is it's kind of a forced apathy. Um, and it's not good. It's certainly not moral. It's not just, it's coercive.
So, innately, when it comes to this conversation, I 100% agree that a human being will be never be able to create a utopia. People will never be able to create a utopia because, as you said, whether you believe it's sin, whether you believe it's the devil, or whether you believe human nature is naturally just corrupt, one thing we know is even if the most just man put it in a system of perfection for the people, the next person who takes that same power that he has been given could potentially corrupt. It will eventually fall apart. We know this because people, absolute power, absolutely corrupts. We know this. But the conversation of safety and freedom is not a conversation of how man creates more safety and creates more freedom. What it actually is a conversation is man's freedom versus the safety that technology provides. And that is the progression that is currently going on. So to kind of set this up, the reason why this came into my mind as a conversation point is because again on the show it's like, hey man, I contextualize, oh man, this is very interesting information, just gotta think a little deeper. I might be thinking too deep, but there's a conversation there. So there's a conversation between the son and his dad, and the conversation is probably something you already have heard. But he was when he was getting his daughter, one thing he said about his daughter is like, "Oh man," because just before this, the daughter of the dad ran away, and the son who's having a daughter was thinking about, "Hey man, if my daughter would ever do that, out then to ensure she doesn't do that, I would put a chip in her like they do dolphins, so I can always track her location." Right. So in that the conversation there is putting a chip in my daughter. And the reason why this conversation is very accurate to now, because you can even think about something that's not necessarily a chip into people, but cell phones is the progression step from before. Now people have a means at any point to contact someone. Before it was just a home phone. Before even there was a home phone, there was no phone. But there's a home phone. You have to make sure you're in the house to contact someone or you go to a booth. Now you have a cell phone, you can contact anybody at any time. Now all these cell phones have a tracker system that will track your location wherever you are. And now the technology is getting even more specific to areas without um, cell towers that will be able to track you based on satellites. So the progression of technology, even from cell phones, is in theory increasing the safety of people. It's now ludicrous to think that a 12-year-old would go out in the world without a cell phone on them because of fear of being kidnapped, which is a legitimate fear for any parent to have. But then the freedom they're losing from having nobody know where they are is being lost. So at this point, there's a recognition, or there should be a recognition, and this is why a lot of people fearmonger and create conspiracy theories, which I guess is fair. The evolution of technology will continue to grow, and the safety of the people will continue to grow as a result of said technology. But as a result of the technology progressing, their freedoms will also be dwindling. So, do we think, or my question for you, Jonathan, do you think that is a natural step for humanity? And I know you're a conservative, so this would be very interesting because usually you guys like to take a step back. Or do you think that at some point, based off the evolution of technology, we should just stop full force and go like, okay, no more progression? Because to make this even more in depth into your utopia, if we put this at its final conclusion, the person who's creating the utopia is not the man, it's the technology. They're the ones creating the utopia. And
Well, I think that's one of the misnomers, is because man creates technology, and it's also
well,
man that
the
implements technology.
technology that is being created would have to be artificial intelligence. And
Yeah,
AI would be the end all be all in terms of figuring out what is best for man itself.
yeah. So I think that's bull crap. AI does not know what's best for man because AI. Okay, so we talked about empathy earlier, right? And this is what comes back. This is why empathy is a good thing because what is AI? AI is essentially a giant psychopath. Because it can like okay, so this is. Have you ever heard of Andrew Clavin? I'm gonna guess the answer is
No,
no. But
no.
so Andrew Clavin is a great guy. We love Andrew Clavin. But he brings up this point, right? If you have an algorithm on your phone, you have a girlfriend, right?
Not yet, but I'm gonna read
Oh,
read this real quick. Someone put over here on Rumble. He said, "Do you read your chat logs? If you do, I'll bring the audience. You have to trust me. I do this all the time. Just a yes or no all is all I need. I'll bring the heat." I don't know what's going on here. That's a very interesting comment. I've never seen someone say something like that. But I'll say yes since I just read it. But no, you don't have to rub it. I'm a
okay.
bachelor. I'm a
Okay,
bachelor
no
out
problem.
here.
No, I thought you said you had a girlfriend. Sorry. Okay.
I
In
indulge
theory,
in things.
if you knew what a girlfriend was, and by some chance, so okay, so we'll say this. My girlfriend, she can get 3 recommendations or 4 or 5, whatever, from an algorithm on her phone of things that she likes, and she can buy them and know that those things are good. And then I can buy her 5 things, and she might only like 3 of them. She might not like the other 2. That does not mean the algorithm knows my girlfriend more than I do, right? Even though it can articulate things that she might want better because she's much, 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 much more than her wants and desires. She is at least those things, but she's not only at those things. And just because the algorithm knows what she wants doesn't mean that the algorithm knows what is best for her because we are much more than simply our wants. We are much more than simply the predictions of our future behavior and what might be good for us. We are much, much more than those things. And AI creating safety, it might know what's the best for us physically, but we are not simply our bodies. We're hylomorphic beings. We're spirit, soul, and body. So AI can never know what's good for our souls because it has no soul and it has no empathy. This is what one of the good things about liberals is they're empathetic. Someone with a liberal temperament is empathetic.
Do you think you can't? Well, I think I know your answer because I know where you're coming from when you say what you're saying. But I'm gonna ask it anyway. Do you think you can't teach AI empathy?
Yes, you cannot. AI
And
can never have.
hypothetically,
This is, and I'll
hypothetically,
tell you why. Oh, go ahead.
well, hypothetically, because all this is in theory, we're not even to the point where this is possible yet. But we're just looking at all scenarios right now. Hypothetically, if they were able to create empathy in AI, do you think its function as a utopian overlord would be just more efficient compared to a man trying to create a utopia, of course? So this guy said Patriots inbound. Keep an eye on that number.
It's gonna sell you
But yeah,
something. I don't know.
I'm waiting. Hey man, I'm curious to see what he got coming over here.
No, I don't because inherently we. So this is the beauty of my beliefs, right? I have a utopia waiting for me. It's heaven. But on Earth, there can never be a utopia because even if we create AI, right, there still has to be a person to implement AI, and as long as humans are making decisions, things will be flawed. The problem is everything that humans create will also be flawed. There is no such thing as creating a perfect AI. So we could say, oh yeah, whatever humans do will be flawed. This is why we need artificial intelligence because artificial intelligence won't be flawed. The problem is it will be flawed because it doesn't have so here's even if you can teach it empathy, right? What it can never have because it doesn't have a real literal soul given by God is it can never have concepts of what is justice. What is it can never live the experience of humans of the pursuit of the truth. You can program in it this is what justice looks like, but that is simply a human interpretation. And as we see right now, the people who are making it are very ideologically captured because if you ask ChatGPT to write a poem about the great feats of Donald Trump, it'll say, I can't do that. But if you do it about Biden, it will spout out a great poem about how amazing Joe Biden is because right now it is flawed humans creating this thing. There's also this is an interesting story once again brought about by Andrew Clavin. So do you know one of the things that has to happen, especially with ChatGPT and these other AI systems? Um, do you know? So like if you try to type in a search scenario, one of the things that doesn't happen is it doesn't show you child porn. It doesn't show you all of these horrible, atrocious things. But here's the
Right.
thing: because it's a large language learning model, it has to be trained to not create those things. So do you know how they do that?
I don't, but I'm gonna at the very least, since this guy's brought in people, I have to respond because I just do. So appreciate you, Gramps, for like bringing people to the stream as we're talking about what we're talking about. I appreciate everybody coming in. Amen. So I just had to shout them out real quick for that. But no, shoot it on me.
Okay. So the way that they train AI to do this is they hire Kenyan immigrants um, for $1 an hour, and they subject them to the child pornography. They subject them to all of those things. They make them watch it, and then they program it. They teach them how to do that into the AI model system. That's how they actually, because it has to be inputted into ChatGPT and into these AI models to show them do not do this thing. But someone has to actually code that into there
Wait,
and
are
watch
you
it.
saying that's what Clavin found for
Yeah, no, he
ChatGPT?
he just no, he I'm not sure if it's ChatGPT specifically, but it's the large AI companies. And yeah, there was an actual news article. I think it might have even been in the Guardian. I'll
Okay.
find it. I'll try to find it and send it to you. But that's how, even if that is how you would program it and train it, somebody has to watch those things. And what they do is they hire these immigrants for like pennies on the dollar to input that into there. And there is a snowball's chance in hell that that reality would not work its way into the artificial intelligence somehow. I mean, from my own experience using ChatGPT, I have noticed obviously it stores all the data I put into it. And when I ask it to write something, it already sounds more and more like my normal writing style, simply because it has access to it. And there's no way that that doesn't input into there as well. So the fact that AI will be some super spectacular world saving event in the creating of the human utopia, I think it's bogus. I don't think it's possible.
Uh, I definitely see what you're saying, and again, appreciate everybody that's showing up. The apparently
What's
real
going
Gramps,
what's going on?
so WH Grandpa, he just decided to bring in a lot of his followers into the Rumble stream. So that's what's going on. So I've been paying attention to everybody that's been saying what's up.
So wait, there's
So
like a stream watching your stream right now?
no. So I have it multi-streamed, and one of the
Yeah.
streams is Rumble. And he
Uh-huh.
popped in for the Rumble stream, and he has people coming in saying what's up. So after I obviously they got they're pouring in, so we're gonna
Oh, nice.
I had to give them the attention they deserve. So
Well,
that's why I'm
thanks,
paying
folks.
attention with what's going on there. If you want to head to if you have like some other device, you can head to Rumble and see what they're saying as well, and so you can see the chat too on your end. But in terms of the AI thing, I do see the concern, and AI is such a very contentious topic because of all the concern for it, and we should have concern for it because we have to make sure it's limited. A lot of the discussions regarding AI is making sure it has a certain level of limitations where it's confounded to a certain program, and it doesn't move beyond the program and makes decisions based um, beyond its capabilities or expected capabilities. So I see all that, of course. But at the end of the day, AI, in addition to a lot of the other technology that I was saying, is the natural progression of advancing society. Increasing technology is advancing society. So the conversation is still at what point should we or even should we even put a halt to all the increased levels of technology that is increasing said safety? Because let's take a step about AI and the moral dilemma of the whether or not it has empathy, if it has a soul, all that stuff. But there's other elements that are potentially morally ambiguous, but increases safety. So we have the phone stuff. The next part of it is, okay, what do you think about people putting a chip in their child? Not in the only purpose of said chip
Mm.
is that they know the location of said child. So that is a another potential progression in terms of technology they may do. And there's a lot we can go into because that is the conversation. The increase of technology is going to make us safer, but at what cost? And should we give away
So
this freedom if we know it's making us safer as a whole? Again, appreciate everybody swinging by that is showing up on the stream. Appreciate all of you. But go ahead.
um, two things. One, I found that article and I sent it to you. It was actually in Time magazine. So I sent you that
Time.
article on Discord.
I haven't seen a Time magazine in a minute. Okay, I bet.
Yeah. Um, the other, so I'll kind of level up that question and throw it back at you. Have you heard of CRISPR-Cas9?
No.
Okay. So CRISPR-Cas9 is a protein and gene sequencing. I believe, and anybody who's a better expert in this can correct me, but it's a protein that's a codable protein that you can inject into a developing baby, and you can have it remove certain genetic predispositions. So if you have a history of diabetes, when the child is still in the womb, developing and growing, you can take this CRISPR-Cas9 and you can inject it into the baby, and you can sequence that protein to cut and remove that genetic predisposition for diabetes and remove it from your child.
Mm.
But here's the thing. You can also put in the genetic predisposition to be 6 foot tall, blonde hair, blue eyes. You can even go so far as to give them higher levels of slow twitch muscle fibers or fast twitch muscle fibers. So imagine a mother, maybe she's a single mother, or maybe she's not, maybe it's whatever, maybe it's two very athletic parents, and they're concerned that their child will not grow up to be an Olympic track star. Utilizing CRISPR-Cas9, they can ensure that their kid will have the predisposition to be, 6'2", with fast twitch muscle fibers, which means they'll be much better at sprinting. They'll be have a good gait. But you can also get rid of all of the genetic predispositions for diseases. And so the eventually, if these really do take off, then imagine the shaming of people if you don't allow your kid to live the best, most healthy life that they can. You owe it to your child to create these designer babies. But you're also removing their freedom. There's always this contentious topic of like how much does genetics play in your actual in your actual life. Like, we also know there's epigenetics. So people who are born in an environment that's a lot of drug addiction will have an actual genetic predisposition to partake in drugs, and the epigenetics.
So I definitely see what you're saying. And again, I'm gonna have to shout out everybody who's joined the stream because he's just pouring in people. So
How many
appreciate
do we
everybody
have?
here. Uh, he brought in so far. He's brought in like 70 people to come watch the
Nice.
stream. So
Oh yeah.
shout out to Gramps right there. So the genetic, and this even coincides with the eugenics argument, is a different argument entirely, in my opinion, when it comes to modifying the genetics, potentially improving the genetics. Now, obviously, what I found interesting was the part where you take away potentially genetic dysfunctions. Obviously, that the the safety argument coincides with obviously you're making their life a lot better, a lot healthier.
Yeah.
But in general, the anytime you're modifying for improvement, I think that doesn't fall in line with safety. And I don't care about people's feelings based off
Yeah.
comparison versus a XYZ was modified this way. Why can't I be that? Well, why didn't you make me that way? At that point, I agree. Even if you don't believe in God, you're playing God at that point. Even editing their genetics to take away something is very sketchy. Again, it's more of a eugenics argument. We'll save that for another episode. That will be a very interesting episode. Well, ultimately, when it comes down to something a little bit more foreign and not diving deep into genetic code or altering their body in some way, something like a chip or something not in that necessarily. Let's take a step back to make it easier to kind of accept for people. The chip that you are giving them, let's say it's an earring. They have an earring or a bracelet or a ring that they have to wear every day to make sure you keep tabs on someone. Let's say they have that, and they obviously from baby to, let's say, when kids start getting moodies around 12 to 14 years old. At that point, they always have to have it on and they always wear it. And then at 12 to 14 years old, you tell them, yeah, you've been having this on. You could take it off when you're 18 years old. At that point, would you say that the cons of losing a 12-year-old's freedom outweighs the extra protection of knowing their location in terms of the safety aspect? Because not only does it go into the location and knowing where they are, it also could potentially read, their body function to see if they're sick and other factors to see of their overall well-being. And this also coincides with our other argument, or not argument, but our other discussion about social media and social media protection versus having the parents having more accessibility towards what they're consuming on the internet. So I'm not necessarily advocating for anything like you need to put a chip on your kid, but it makes sense that this is the natural progression of how things will be as technology continues to advance and satellites continue to advance to hard in locations, and cars continue to advance in terms of their safety features, where the fact that there's cars out there that literally stop for you so you don't crash.
Mhm. Yeah.
Right, so we're going to keep on going in this direction. How will we know when to stop, or should we stop? That is the big conversation here. Also
That's
appreciate
it.
everybody coming in. Gotta shout
um,
out new people.
absolutely, you do. I just did this thing on my podcast where I'm going to do appendix episodes afterwards and read people's comments and answer questions and that sort of thing. Try to bring up engagement, but it's an interesting conversation. Um, and I don't necessarily. I can see you separate like the designer aspect of the CRISPR stuff, but for the protection of people, I just, for me, it just grates against me the notion of subjecting people to tracking, and I think there's this because the way that you've been framing this, and that's why I'm going to respond to that because that's the way you've been framing it is parents with their kids, and there's two kind of aspects of that. Um, well, I'll just say this. That presupposes the necessity for that. It presupposes that parents are putting their kids in risky situations, and the parents are not being prudential in where they're allowing their kids to go. And so,
I
because
don't
you're
think that's necessarily the case. And what I mean by that is there's always going to be a statistics of harm that will be done because ultimately there will be bad people out in the world.
yes,
The goal is to reach the 0% of making sure that harm is done. So even if we're saying that the statistics are decreasing by said action by parents based on how they are raising them, regardless, there's still going to be a percentage of potential harm that will be inflicted.
okay, but so here's kind of the thing. Um, by the nature of technological advancement, when we are advancing, we don't really see the downsides. The downsides don't really come around until years later. In 2008 or 2010, I don't remember exactly, when the iPhone came out, it was only positives. It was, this is going to be amazing. But now we are seeing downsides and negatives in large swaths that we never would have perceived before. We never would have thought of a spiritual health, a mental, whatever you call it, a mental health crisis in young people because of the advancement of the iPhone. It has done so much for business. People run several businesses on their phones. The computing power has been an amazing turn of events. But we never would have foreseen in the wildest dreams and the wildest predictions the behavioral health crisis that has come about because of that technological advancement. That technological advancement has done amazing things for the safety of humans, for the education of humans, for the education up, for all of these things. It's done amazing things, and there's safety benefits to having the phone around, like you said as well. But we can't really perceive the implications of continual. I mean, we can't even perceive what the downsides of the safety features on a car could be. But as cars grow more autonomous, what happens? Like, so right now I work in a court, and I work in a municipal court, which means a lot of what we deal with is traffic citations. There will come a time, I am sure, when your car, you get pulled over and you have an outstanding warrant, and you try to drive to work one day, and the car just says, sorry, but your outstanding warrant is now due, taking you to the local municipal court. And it'll just drive you there. Like, my girlfriend's car has automatic lane detection. So if I am for some reason distracted, or if I'm for some reason, even if I'm totally focusing, like, I can feel the wheel pushing against me if I get even close to the yellow line. So and Tesla cars already can drive themselves, and this car can pretty much drive itself too, because it can detect the lines, and it can detect where the car is in front of me and behind me. So for all intents and purposes, it can drive itself. And that's going to be one of the potential downsides. But that's a good thing, right? Because it's taking people's they're criminals. They violated the law, and that is what is good for them. But what happens when that can be applied to other contexts? Like, say, the truckers who are protesting freedom in Canada. What if they had smart trucks? What if they had smart vehicles? We already know that their bank accounts were shut down. What happens if their cars turn them into the gulags? Like, that's kind of gloom and doom sort of thing, right? And I don't
Yeah.
like that way normally, but those are kind of the third. Like, there's a guy who has a very brilliant example of this. Um, excuse me. Um, the speed limits. One of the biggest causes of death when it comes to crashes is the speed limit, right? If things were 75 miles per hour, if the crash is far less lethal at 55 versus 45 versus 25. So if our Department of Transportation wanted to cut down on traffic deaths, one of the easy things that they could do is cut the speed limit in half. The maximum speed limit is 35 miles per hour or 45 miles per hour, right? And that would make collisions far, far less lethal. What could be the potential side effects of that, though? One of the biggest side effects is transportation of food. Food is going to get places drastically slower. Grain is going to be transported across the country drastically slower. The production of food would go down astronomically. And there could be a lot of deaths because supermarkets aren't being restocked fast enough. If they're trying to, primarily it would be farmers with fresh grain and those sorts of things transporting those. Their livelihood could be gone because by the time their grain gets anywhere, it could be bad. It could be spoiled. We would have to depend far more on freezers, which we know are preservatives to make sure that the food transports healthier and stays good. But then there's a lot of health benefits or health side effects that we're seeing from a lot of those preservatives, but also like medical transplants. Like, a lot of people don't realize that when you're transplanting organs places, or when you're transplanting, even EMTs don't necessarily just get to speed as fast as they want unless there's only a certain level of emergency, which they're really told not to do that much because there's huge liabilities if they do get in a crash. Um,
Right.
so imagine transplanting um, very important heart transplants that are driving them across. There's a lot of these second and third order side effects that we don't really think of just for the name of safety. Like another example, the masks. Everybody was talking about the masks. The mask, they save lives but all the evidence that showed how detrimental masks be, especially for people working in factories for 10, 12 hours, reintaking their own carbon dioxide over and over and over again, they were passing out. I mean, we had my friend is the head nurse during the COVID pandemic of the COVID unit, and she was sending us articles about the side effects of masks that was just completely ignored. But there was a lot of side effects from especially wearing the N95 masks all day, every day. Many, many, many huge health detriments that were just completely ignored. So even if in the name of safety, we don't understand the second and third order consequences right away.
So before I dive into that, again, I'm gonna shout out all the people that came in. Just a large influx. So I'm trying to navigate both what you guys got and you guys coming in. Again, appreciate you, Grandpa, of course. Um, I'm gonna read out some of the stuff they say, and then Jonathan, you can respond before I go into my whole spiel. Someone said we only have disease and such because of them touching everything they shouldn't. Someone else said there is Bill Gates YouTube video, something like this, that he was pitching in the CIA early 2000s. I'm guessing it's revolving around the progression of technology. A lot of people against AI stuff, very similarly. Someone said we stop before it can be a thing. Shouldn't have ever started the AI thing, just something else to take away our freedom. Someone else said the developer of AI was before Congress to beg them to regulate it. They now know the damage that it could cause to humanity. And then read this, and then how about the crime be punished or harshly against the criminal, e.g., death, instead of harming innocent children by implanting a foreign object? The death penalty.
Are they
Okay.
just commenting on the stream?
Yeah, on Rumble. It's live.
Huh.
So
Oh, I see. Oh, the live chat. Man, I was looking
yeah.
in the totally wrong spot.
So see, a lot of the things you were saying, I definitely see, because when it comes to the progression of technology, what is going to follow, or a bunch of potential consequences that nobody could foresee. One of the things that I did hear in terms of humans is that they are terrible in mitigating consequences, but are great in terms of adapting to said consequences and creating solutions based on said consequences. And I think that is just something that we have to adhere to. When it comes to technology, overall, I would say the introduction for a lot of technology, specifically, not policies, but technology that has very specific purpose. Policies are too abstract and too nuanced to say that they're always guaranteeing an increase in safety. Well, when someone creates a specific technology, such as the phone, such as social media, such as certain vaccines, depending on whatever you feel about the COVID, but at the very least, the other vaccines, regardless, a lot of these technologies have an intended purpose, and that intended purpose is supposed to solve a problem that currently exists. So, overall, technology has always, in my opinion, more than likely, I'll say, it's hard to be absolute, but more than likely, it's been a net positive for society and humanity. I think humanity right now
Sure.
is overall in a safer place than they have been in the past. Now the problem now, and we've talked about it plenty, is that people are so safe. People have so much time on their hands. They don't know what to do with it. They just spend all the time on social media. They have plenty of food they can get. Even and when it comes to like homelessness and certain people in terms of poverty, even those individuals in terms of that has let or increased safety compared to back then in terms of those individuals. We got to fix it still, but I'm just comparing it to other eras back in the day. So overall, humanity, especially in America, has increased many, many, many times over to where it is currently. Now, I agree that a lot of the things that are going on now, the issues that we're having now that we spoke about in plenty, are things that we have to constantly, adapt to and solve for. One thing that I said for social media, for example, is that this current generation, such as mine and yours, who kind of grew up with social media when it wasn't that popular, then grew up to the point where it's now extremely popular, and then kind of grew up a little bit before when it even existed, kind of knows that, hey man, when I'm like parenting, I know that too much social media is a problem, over reliance on social media is a problem, and human activity is a must. The generation that kind of didn't know that, or those kids that didn't have parents that knew that, are the ones struggling the most, because those individuals are just given technology, given social media, and the parents like, YOLO, it's supposed to be fun, it's supposed to be interactive. I don't know the consequences. So the only way we're going to learn the issues is if they happen, unfortunately, but that is the case. We can't create a simulate it, and then figure it out unless AI advances that much. And then maybe we can. That's another aspect of safety. I'm just joking. But overall, I would say that technology has done its purpose in terms of increasing the safety. It will continue to create issues based on whatever is next. Now, there may be a tipping point where
Well,
it could destroy humanity, but at that point, we have to figure out what that tipping point is.
when it comes back to like the tracker thing, right? I think of course, anecdotal evidence, but I think there is a kind of time and place for everything. I have friends that had what one might call helicopter parents, right? Where they needed to know their time and place at all times. They had the iPhone trackers on so they can see where they are, and all those sorts of things. And they were very strict. And the thing is once the freedom came, once they turned 18, once or whatever the delegated age was, they kind of went crazy and they broke all the rules that they could break, and they, you know, they took full advantage of their freedom to the point where it was no longer beneficial. It was kind of at the other end. They were in total safety and then they swing to total anarchy, which is not good. It's equally as bad. And that's the thing. When we can't imagine the riskiness that people would partake in with the trackers just to test the limit of the trackers. And so for most people, it might be okay. They might not care. I mean, I also have friends that, their device trackers are on, and so their parents can see where they're at, but their parents aren't that strict. They just know that it's there, and if they ever need to check, they can check. But they don't enforce all of these ridiculous. I mean, my parents, I've never had a curfew my entire life. That said, almost my entire life, I've gone to bed before my parents because, you know, that's what I do. I need my sleep. Takes a lot of work to look this good. You know what I'm saying?
Hey man,
Um,
respect,
but
respect.
yeah, but the point of it is it comes back to those second and third order consequences, because I just know people that like to push the boundaries, that like to push the rules, and those people will always be there. And as technology increases, the riskiness that will need to take place to counteract the safety measures of the technology will get higher and higher and higher. And I think that it'll just create it'll kind of it'll become the thing it's trying to create, is what I'm saying. If you have these technologies that are designed to create safety, they will end up creating hardship, I think, instead. And I think it's because it's the story of the Tower of Babel. It is we men trying to be like gods. The people of the Tower of Babel were not struck down because God was worried that their tower was going to get too tall. That's not what that story's about. It's they and it says, and I believe it's in Deuteronomy, and they said, "We will make a name for ourselves." And God said, because they were of one mind, he struck down the tower and confused their language. But the problem is the defiance of, we will make a reputation for ourselves, right? Because so a name, the word name, means reputation. That's actually what it means. So it says they have like, that family is a good name. They made a good name for themselves. It's talking about reputation. So that's a whole conversation that I have a lot about the importance of names. But they were saying that we ourselves are going to become like God. And the way that they're going to do it was the symbol of the tallest, most primary thing.
Stop right there. Yes, this is a little mini ad. Don't skip. Don't skip. All I want to tell you right now is that at the end of the day, when it comes down to all the discussions I want to have, I want to be able to communicate with you, the audience. I want to be able to relay a message and receive a message from everyone and try to come up with these great solutions that I keep on talking about. So if you want to be part of the community, make sure you go to the website and sign up for not only the email list so you can get weekly emails from me for the podcast episode, informational sessions, all that great stuff, but also sign up to go on my Discord so you can be part of the discussions, debates on my live streams. So be sure to go to the website www.purplepoliticalbreakdown.com and go to the email list, sign up, and go to the Discord and join the server. Now back to the episode.
And that's what we're trying to do when we try to create a utopia. It's also what we try to do when we create conspiracy theories as well. I just did a podcast. My own podcast was on conspiracy theories, and the nature of conspiracy theories. The nature of conspiracy theories is that people are removing. This is obviously my podcast is geared towards Christians more, but I think it stands true for other people because God is real. And when you partake in the conspiracy theories, you are saying that there is this cabal of people that have the most primary control over everything that's happening, and they are in essence gods because they dictate the ways and wiles of the world. And that removes that authority from God by nature. And the same thing happens when we try to create a utopia, is we say that we are going to become gods and we are going to dictate the wares and the wiles of the world. And I think this is why the conservatives are always pointing out conspiracy theories, because the liberals are always trying to create utopia. And to create a utopia, you must control the people. And so it's kind of a exposure and then identification, exposure and identification. And I think this is why there's a loop of the liberals saying, "Oh, the conservatives are conspiracy theorists," and the conservatives are saying, "Oh, look at this, they're trying to create a utopia," and then it's just a never-ending loop, and it all stems back to the problem of Babel, of people trying to be like God. And I think that's why utopias always fail, and why the progression of safety. I think you're right insofar as, for the most part, technology has been primarily to our benefits. Like people never realize how many lives are saved by air conditioners. Like air conditioners save so many people's lives. And then the problem is just AC in general. So obviously it can also, during the cold times, you can make the temperature warmer. And this is why it's crazy to me that the climate people are trying to get rid of air conditioners and artificial warming as well, just climate control, because more people are now dying of cold than are dying of heat deaths. And so if they're getting rid of the energy expenditure that cities can use in colder climates, hundreds of thousands of people are dying because of that. And that's ludicrous to me. So obviously, a lot of technology has been to our benefit. But I think you're right that eventually there will be a tipping point when it's going to be much, much more to our detriment.
I think the possibility of a tipping point is definitely there, but there's also the possibility that a tipping point never arrives, and it's a very interesting question regarding that.
Well,
Also, shout out to all the new people that showed up to the live. Shameless plug. We go live every Monday, Thursday, 8 p.m. EST to talk about a new topic, new discussion. All the podcast that we run over here is a podcast that discusses a lot of issues without political bias to find solutions about all these different types of topics. And so make sure you guys tune in for that. Of course, like and follow, of course, as well.
hey, can I address somebody from the comment that I
Go
pulled it
for
up
it.
to? God, I think his name, where did he just go? It was Ice something. Said
Iceman
God is
76.
real. Yeah, God is real, but the devil is also real. I said that earlier. I agree with you, my man.
So for me, when it comes down to this, is that there's three things that I want to bring up and I want to address. Now, the first thing that you brought up was um, in reference, nah, I completely forgot the first thing. It'll come back to me. But at the very, I'm gonna start off with back, and maybe I'll start remembering. That's how my brain works. I'll move back and then to back to forward. So the thing with the tipping point, I definitely, like I said, it's very ambiguous whether or not that will be to the detriment for society. We definitely will have to see based on how it progresses. Of course, when you were referring to like the dichotomy between the left and right, with like the left trying to create utopias and the right trying to push back and saying you guys are trying to be like God. The only reason why I have a hard time, getting with that, although I think that statement is true, but my point is, in my opinion, we live in a society. Obviously, we live in a society, but as a society, the idea of a society is to continuously grow and progress. At the end of the day, whether you agree or not, the idea is to create that utopia you have issue with. Now, not necessarily create a utopia to, have an overarching ruler and live by rules that everyone must follow and everyone must live by. Not that type of utopia, but a
Mhm.
utopia in the sense where everybody lives to the core principles of what it is that all Americans should have. You know, um, joy is a very important part. Being fed, you know, living happily with shelter, having loved ones around you. There's all these different aspects that every person, every human being wants. So we always have to, the idea is to make sure that we create a society that all people are able to access these type of things to its fullest. And that,
Yeah.
in my opinion, would in theory, that perfect society that adheres to
Mhm.
all these aspects and attributes, in my opinion, would be a utopia. So
Yeah.
that's why I think that part, I do believe our goal should be that. And I feel like, you can correct me if I'm wrong, when it comes to Christians or people who are religious too, a lot of the things that they kind of believe is in pursuit of being the perfect individual, not being Jesus, but being the best version, best individual in following Jesus or in God, and
Okay.
following the rules that they have to abide to, being that perfect version of themselves. So
So
go ahead.
so yeah, and you are mostly right. So Christians, particularly, we are told to be like Jesus. We are literally
Yeah.
admonished to be perfect as I am perfect, said Jesus. And here's the thing, though. We will never get there, but that doesn't quite excuse us from the journey, anyways. We are always to attempt and strive to be more like Christ. We are told, Christian and disciple, these mean tiny Christ is what Christian means. And so when we call ourselves Christians, we are saying that we are representations of Christ because we are. And so we have to strive to be perfect. Here's the thing. Um, the qualifications that you gave are good ones, right? For a utopia. A practical progression forward to strive for these things. The problem is because we live in a liberal culture, right? Our society, many of our institutions are dominated by liberals. And I'm not saying the leftists. I'm saying literally liberal people. And the problem with modern liberalism and modern culture at writ large is it is a materialist culture. And so the progression is always for a progression of material things to satisfy material needs. The government's role is not necessarily to just always provide all of the material needs. Our government is supposed to provide us the opportunity for human flourishing. One of the issues of the Enlightenment is, or as I call it, the Endarkenment, is it got rid of an essential aspect of the flourishing, which is the reality of an eternal dimension, the reality of the fact that we are hylomorphic beings. We see this on all sides of the societal debates right now, especially in transgenderism, in which people say we are only a soul, which is why a woman can be trapped in a man's body and they can then carve up their bodies to mimic that. But we are, in fact, all three. We are hylomorphic beings. And so when it comes to flourishing, there must be an aspect that gets to those deeper needs, the more eternal dimensions, the realities of our soul. And a utopia can never really fully address that because, well, for a number of reasons, but I'll leave it at that. And that's one of the issues with this progressive, especially in the culture that we live, is we're not progressing towards that fuller, fundamental requirement for flourishing. Rather, we are just progressing towards the higher amounts of physical, material needs met, like you pointed out. And they're good things. I don't want to discard that, but it will never get to a truly utopic place because all of those other aspects that are key for human flourishing. I mean, we talked about this before. We live in such a posh culture that we don't really need to debate the big questions anymore. There's no need to debate what is justice, what is all these things, because we kind of know that people settled that debate long ago, but there's no difficulty. There's no reason to kind of rehash those things, except for kind of right now in this moment that we're in because of this kind of societal discourse that's happening. But I think that is why the progress, because you're right, we are progressing towards something. We'll always progress towards something, but at the same time, right now, we're not really progressing towards anything. We seem to be progressing away from a whole lot of things, though.
So before that, someone said something that you might like. They said, "I agree. We should strive to be Christ-like. We'll never be perfect." So
Yeah.
shout out to you. And also, someone said talking about climate change. We're gonna have that climate change episode in due time.
Yep.
But with what you said, I definitely see a lot of what you're saying, and innately, I believe, without necessarily being religious, that humans can't do that. Obviously, I don't have faith that human beings naturally would be able to do something like that. Which is why the technology aspect of it makes it so interesting. Is how much can technology provide to fulfill said needs in the future. And I'm not really sure, depending on how it progresses and what technologies are made, because we see nowadays that so much of very unique technologies that are able to increase the efficiencies on different aspects of life. You know, there's also the question on how much society is going to allow these technologies to flourish, because we have other conspiracies saying the government won't allow certain technologies to be built because it may interfere with the economic system and the current very very rich people. So that's a different discussion in its entirety. But if it were ideally able to flourish as it should, then I'm curious to see how those functions would be able to address these needs to reaching utopia, which is, making sure that human beings in their natural state are not interfering with that. And I think there's a possibility there potentially. But we're gonna have to see the progression of technology. I remembered earlier, but overall, based on what we know now, I definitely agree with what you're saying. But I remember what something earlier that you mentioned that I was thinking about, and you were talking about parents being strict and trying to prevent risk. I don't necessarily believe that you are making someone safer by preventing risk. That's the whole thing with I think the movie's called Minority Report, right? Where
Oh, yeah, that's a great movie.
so there was a movie about that, and there's an anime about that as well called
Well,
Psychopaths.
it was a book first. Just saying.
Okay, there's a
Philip,
book, movie,
Philip
and an
K. Dick.
anime. Give credit to all three functions, but all three types of media. But in these types of media, what is happening is that these criminals are getting killed before they commit a crime. And I don't know how the Minority Report does it, but in Psychopaths, they're able to gauge the levels of criminality of the person based off the technology they built. So that's at that point, that's a preventative measure, a preventative, trying to prevent some type of risk potentially happening, preventing an action type to happen. And I don't necessarily agree that increasing safety. My thing is safety. The important parts of safety for me, at the very least, is when the situation causes, you have the most apt tools to either save the person, rescue the person, help the person. That's the big one, help the person. And obviously, knowing their location if they're lost would obviously be an amazing thing to do. Knowing if their body is like going in shock while they're going in shock is an important thing to do. When you try to prevent someone to do something, at that point, I think that safety is going over the line. Anytime when you do like preventative measure techniques, especially even with technology, that's when I say you're going over the line. You're reaching that tipping point. But you have to allow people, and this kind of goes in line with your, thing before. You have to allow people to live their life, live their truth, live whatever way they want to live for the most part. And then if situation arises, which is also why the car that stops when an accident is about to happen is another amazing safety tool. You have to let them allow them to take risks, but we can create technologies to make sure those risks are not as damaging as they would have been without said technology. I think that's
I
the most
think
important
there's
part.
yeah, I agree. I think this is a Catholic belief as far as I understand, and I agree with it mostly. I think it's a good rule of thumb. And technology um, becomes problematic when it establishes dominance over the origin and destiny of human life as a whole. I think Catholics perceive it a little bit differently, but I think it's a good rule of thumb. When there is technology that will establish dominion over the origin and the destiny of the human species as a whole, I think that's problematic. And the reason it's problematic is because we are, you know, the children of God. We are his creation, we are his crowning glory. And I don't think that's a separate, I think that's the reason why humans are more valuable than animals, fundamentally. And if there's something that controls and dominates our outcome, that can be a problem. So when there's some kind of technology that will, in the Brave New World, have you heard of that at least, if not read it?
I heard the song Brave New World, I
I don't
think.
know what it is. Well, no, it was a
Maybe,
book
maybe it's a
by
song.
Aldous Huxley.
Brand New World. That's probably what it
Brave
is.
New World. It's a Brave New World.
Books and me, bro, it doesn't exist, bro.
We'll change that slowly but surely.
One
In
day,
a Brave
one
New
day.
World, there was a a factory that essentially endlessly split um what's it called? Shoot. The way that twins are made, so that is split, and then they can just endlessly split them. And so they can make all of these classes of people. So there's the alpha class, the delta class, the beta class, and it was just they picked kind of this genes and then just essentially made infinite levels of clones of one another. And then the highest class, which I forget, um, they were allowed to be separate and different, but they were designed in such a way that they were predisposed to do certain jobs. And so you didn't really have much of a choice. And the famous thing is everybody belonged to everybody else. So it was considered rude or offensive to turn down someone's sexual advances, regardless of any characteristic. So whether it's a dude or a lady or whatever it is, or if there's going to be four of you or seven of you or just two of you, it was rude because everybody belongs to everybody else. And that's an example of some sort of technology that is taking control over human autonomy.
Yeah.
Because fundamentally, what we're here for is a relationship with God, and it must be intimate and personal. And if you don't have the capabilities of doing that, then there's something wrong, because that is what God fundamentally desires for each and every one of us. And so taking someone's autonomy away is an infraction of that, in my belief. And that is one of the most important characteristics of who we are, is because if we were created to just be mindless drones, then we're not really capable of true love. And love is such an important thing, just for our own humanness and our experiences with one another. The greatest commandment of the Bible is love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, soul, mind, strength, and love thy neighbor as thyself. With those, all the commandments are fulfilled, because if you love someone, you seek what is in their best interest fully and completely, which once again is something that AI can never do. No technology company can wish for my safety at the same level with which my brother does, whether my parents do, my girlfriend, any other person in my life. Some technology company, some piece of technology can never love me and wish for my good in the same way because it's not human. It doesn't have empathy.
Yeah, that's a very fair point. There's really not much I disagree with. We're definitely on point with that. I guess the biggest distinguishers, when it comes down to what a lot of things we're saying, is that absolute freedom is bad. Absolute safety, as of our understanding right now, is bad. For the most part, trying to emit safety to the point where you're sacrificing some sense of humanity is bad. But overall, the for me, when it comes to technology, more so than like policies or anything, technology overall is the big function of increasing safety, and as long as they're doing so to mitigate damage more so than preventing risk, then I think we should keep on going in that track. um I don't think there's anything wrong with that aspect of it. Also, a lot of people are here, saying a lot of good stuff about Christianity, God, all that good stuff. Someone asked the question. They said, could this AI technology be the mark of the beast? What do you
No,
think, Jonathan? He
no.
said no. He doesn't believe it. He doesn't agree with that. Um, Also, since you guys are all new, you come in here from Grandpa. If you guys have any questions you want to ask either of us, feel free to put it down in the chat, and then we'll answer it. Of course, you guys are having great conversations about, you know, technology, but I think
There's
people don't
somebody
need to
that
be.
wrote.
Go ahead.
There's somebody that wrote. There are some people born with a criminal mind and live a criminal life. And I don't know that I totally agree with that, because once again, that removes the concept entirely of free will. If you're born with a criminal mind, then that means you are destined to be a criminal, and I don't think that that is quite the way that it works. But
There's some argument that there's people who are more prone to criminal activity based off. I think you
yeah,
talked
there
about a
are,
little
and
bit
that's
in terms of
epigenetics.
genetics. Yeah,
Yep.
so that may be true, but you're not guaranteed anything once you're born when it comes to your direction of life, for
Yeah.
the most part. Um,
There was something else I was going to bring up. That's why I had a thought. You asked about like a tipping point.
yeah, the
Like,
tipping
was there a
point.
tipping point with technology? And I'd say there's a somewhat of an example of a tipping point in which technology that was good has become detrimental. And I think that it is contraception. I'm not anti contraception. I think that they're good things, but there is a point now in which our society is not it. We haven't reached a replacement rate, which means soon. I mean, and we see this in China, right? Because of such strict contraceptive laws, their entire population is collapsing because they can't make enough kids to replace the ones that were lost.
You said China?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's a huge concern that China has now, which is why they got rid of their one child policy because they realized that their population was collapsing because firstly, there's a difference in because like obviously I think the best form of contraception is abstinence. One of the things that's been true forever is once you get married, you become very, very productive, but instead we just live a life of kind of contraception, and we see parents having fewer and fewer kids. There's lots of single parent or single child households now. People aren't producing, and in a lot of ways it's because of a contraceptive culture. I want to reiterate and say I'm not anti-contraception, but that is a technology that was meant for safety. It was meant to prevent a lot of sexually transmitted diseases. It was meant
That
to eliminate
is
a lot of it, but
that
now
is
it's
the
reaching
the
it.
thing right there. It's
Yes.
the preventative safety measures are always the skeptical ones, I feel like, and they probably cause the most problems.
Yeah, and so that's an example of a technology that was meant for safety. It was meant to help keep diseases. It was also meant to kind of, in some ways, as a result of the sexual liberation kind of movement, where everybody can be everybody is, and you can have a bunch of um, casual sex all the time that's without consequence, um, especially with like birth control and the pills and all those sorts of things. But it's one that we are now seeing is kind of becoming detrimental because America is now also at the risk of a population decline. Everybody's worried that there's going to be overpopulation, but everything seems to be showing that fewer and fewer, especially first world societies. Third world societies don't actually have this problem in the same degree, but first world societies are on the risk of population collapse because of this oversaturation of contraception.
So yeah, I definitely see what you're saying, but it makes me think that it's not. I don't even know if it's necessarily a technology thing in that situation. I think it's more of a culture thing because, like you said, it's the sexual exploration phase, and I think a lot of current societies also like it plays a part. I'm not gonna say it doesn't play a part. It definitely plays a part, but it's hard to say that it my thing when it comes to a tipping point is that technology once it's introduced, that technology is the reason. And I don't think contraception is the reason. I think it's just part of the reason. I think that would be the difference for me, but I definitely see what you're saying based on what you're talking about. Someone actually
Got
said
a bunch of Christians in the chat. Woo!
yeah, Belgian Christians. Someone said, really enjoying this intelligent discussion. Riddell and Jonathan, WH Grandpa finds the best streams for us to support and participate in. That's what we do. It would be hilarious to see what Paul would be saying. All these people, all these Christian people.
Bro,
He's Christian
yeah,
though, so it's like
he's he's
he's
Lutheran.
a type of
I'm just
Christian.
kidding. I'm just kidding. Yeah, we love Paul. I would be very curious to see what he has to say about these. It'd be.
Oh yeah, his I
I
would.
mean, I have a
I
s- I have a feeling that we would see some communist tendencies come out in him.
I think he would definitely lead. See me, I'm like wavering in the middle, and then you're more freedom. That it would literally be the whole thing. He would be more safety, you're more freedom, and I'm like,
Well, I
mm,
it would be so interesting. I wish that he was here.
yeah, that would
It
have
would be very.
made the whole conversation full circle. So we said sometimes loving your neighbor is really hard too. I have to pray often about it.
Mm-hmm. And then
Amen.
someone said loving your family can be harder.
uh, so well, when it comes down to the conversation as a whole. Right. Because, like I said, we talked about a lot of points in referencing safety and freedom, but I guess the big point we're gonna try to figure out is which is more valuable, freedom or safety.
Freedom,
Do you think
because
society today is valuing freedom more or safety more
society today.
in America? I don't really care about the other countries.
Well, I think this is actually the struggle that's being played out, but I think both sides are wrong because, like you pointed out, and like I pointed out, um, total freedom is bad, but so especially like look over the period of COVID was such an interesting example, and
Yeah.
that's what I used in my last podcast where I talked about a number of things through the Twilight Zone, um, using the Twilight Zone as an example, but um, in COVID that was the battle. The battle was over freedom and safety. One side of the aisle was saying safety is the most important thing. We must do whatever we can to flatten the curve. Safety is, you have to be primarily concerned with other people's safety. And then there was the other side who was like, no, freedom. I want to do what I want to do. Gosh dang it. And I'm going to do it. But that's just as rash and foolish because freedom is the freedom to do what one ought, just as the government's job is to pursue and cultivate the flourishing of its people. And we do that through life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And the pursuit of happiness is really talking about joy. It's not talking about the instantaneous pleasures of whatever you want to do. It's that's a discussion for another time. But that's the quintessential battle. And the problem is both sides take it at such a materialistic surface level approach that they're both wrong. That I think freedom is the more prime thing to be concerned about, but freedom in the proper context. Because right in a game of football, you are perfectly free to move along the field with anonymity to achieve the goal of taking the ball and getting it into the other one marked out portion of the field, the touchdown zone, the end zone, whatever it is. the
Who
game would
said
not be
touchdowns?
the game would not be a free game if the players could just run through the stands. That would be anarchy because there's
Very
no
true.
goal to the freedom. There would be no goal to the game if the point of the game was just to take the ball and run it around the stadium. There must be a goal, an end to the reason we have freedom, and that's to pursue human flourishing and a host of other reasons. But that's what freedom is. Freedom must come within a context to interpret it.
Hmm. Shout out everybody who appeared to the stream. Um, so as an individual, I would agree with you. Freedom is more important, but I feel like there is a lot of different perspectives we have to go into this for us to have the complete picture of the conversation. And it's what's more valuable, not necessarily like one over the other, because that's nonsense. It's what's more valuable. And as an individual, for me and you, I think we both say freedom. Um, I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory. It goes hand in hand with your initial, you know, thought experiment that you were talking about. But the next perspective we have to look into is as a parent, which is more valuable as a parent of a child, the child's freedom or the child's safety? And while you read that, while you think about that, someone said, verse. Is this your favorite verse? Timothy 3:13. But
It's
evil
not.
men and imposters. Now, you're the religious guy. You say the verse. I'm not the religious guy. You say the
Okay,
verse.
Timothy 3:13. But evil men and impostors will go worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived. Oh, well, that comes up to the context. And another verse, I think it's later on in Timothy, where it says, "Men will set up for themselves teachers to scratch their own itching ears." And we see that a lot today. Those are the imposters, the people. There's people who Jesus talks about will say, "Lord, Lord, did I not do miracles and signs and wonders in your name?" And he said, "Depart from me, for I never knew you." There's people who are something like that. There's also in later on in Timothy, that was that First Timothy? Did you put in there or Second Timothy? I think in
3:13.
second. She didn't say. There's First and Second Timothy. I think in Second
Oh, there
Timothy,
is.
somewhere in the fourth chapter 4, it talks about people who will always seek to learn but never come to the understanding. They will always seek out truth but never come to the understanding of the truth, and it's because they're imposters. It's because they're sophists. So yeah, I agree. Good sentiment. It's a Timothy's good. You should read it. Everybody should read it. But the question you asked was parents. Parents, I think, are concerned. I think somebody put in there in the chat that freedom and safety are kind of equal. And I think when it comes to parents, that kind of holds true. Parents, we talked about this with Nate, that parents are supposed to have a vision of their children. And it's one that includes safety, but it's also one that includes freedom because you don't want to be a tyrannical parent. Otherwise, your children will loathe you and they will resent you for their whole lives. You can't impose your will upon them. You must be concerned with their safety, but you also must be concerned with them. Once again, this comes down to the one thing that AI and technology can never have: empathy. Parents have to have empathy. They have to understand where their kids are at. Sometimes they have to be firm and say, no, for your benefit, for your safety, you cannot do this. But the reason you cannot do this is because I know what you're going through because I've been there before. That's the advantage that a parent has over the children, is they've gone through the journey before and they know that that will not be good for you. But it also, this is the one difference. The government has a responsibility that's very limited over us, and it is to ensure our flourishing. Parents, but here's the thing: the government is not responsible to anybody else for us. We are responsible. So that's why it's supposed to be a republic, a government by the people for the people. Parents are accountable to a higher power for the way that they have treated and reared the children. And that is the difference. That is why they have a little bit more of the emphasis on safety, but they can't still be tyrannical. The Bible is very explicit. You know, this is the thing that I brought up with Nate that we kind of disagreed on, but I think if we would have hashed it out, we would have agreed. Um, the Bible says that the parent, when disciplining the child, is not to provoke their children to wrath and anger. And that is a very specific reaction when it comes to the discipline process, that you make sure you do it in such a way that they do not revile you for it. Because when I'm disciplined by my parent, I was always done it in the correct manner. And I never despised my parents for it. I always realized what I did was wrong, and I came to an understanding of how I can do something better. And that's something that the government can never do. It's something that technology can never do.
Hmm. Before I go into it, Real Grandpa said, "Do we need a Patriot boost? I'll reshare if you're going to stay live for a bit." Um, what do you think, Jonathan? How long do we should we stay live?
Hey man, you know me. Whenever this podcast is over, I'm in bed within minutes. So I don't care.
We'll be alive for a bit longer. We'll be alive for a bit longer. Appreciate you, Grandpa, of course. And then God's Redeemed said Second Timothy 3:13 to 3:15. So they said
Powerful.
second.
Heart emoji.
Um, but when I'm thinking about parents and the values of freedom and safety for their own child, in my opinion, I think safety is probably more valuable because how I look at it, and I'm not saying it's like a large margin, I'm not saying it's like 80-20 or something, but when I'm thinking about the decisions made for said child in any most circumstances, I feel like the first instinct is to value their safety over their freedom in that particular spot. You go over all the safety features. For example, if it's a child and they're going over a friend's house, you first figure out who the child is, who the parents are, what will you be doing. So you go through a lot of safety measures. You figure out the safety of the child, and if you deem the safety being of the child being potentially at risk, their freedom is not nearly as important. And I feel
Yeah.
like that is a thought process that happens more frequently in terms of valuing the safety over the child, which is why I would say that a parent, when it comes to their child, they're probably valuing safety over freedom.
Yeah.
And I mean, it makes sense at the end of the day because this is like the most precious thing in your entire life. I mean, your family, whether you're mother or father, it doesn't matter, is everything for you, everything to you. And if anything were to happen to your child, that would be the worst thing ever. The ultimate potential negative, if you take it to the furthest extent, if the safety is not properly instilled for the child, what could result is them getting hurt, them dying, them getting kidnapped, maybe. If they're losing their freedom, then, the most that could happen, and very bad things, obviously, is, they lose their individuality, or when they grow up, they kind of backlash in a very negative
Yeah.
way if you're overly strict. Both things are bad, but you can see which one would be worse for a parent. So you have to navigate both of them very appropriately. But I would say safety is more
Yeah,
valuable
I can
in general.
definitely see that. That's a good approach, I think.
Um, Now the next approach would be from the government as a leader of the people in the government. And you're looking at the people by and large, and you're making policy decisions for the people by and large. At that point, what are you valuing most for the people? Are you
Freedom.
valuing their freedom or their safety? Freedom? Why? Why is that?
Freedom. Because I think I chronicled my reasons why parents have a greater responsibility for safety, as you said. And the very reason that the parents have that obligation is the same reason why the government does not. Because the government is not our king, they're not our monarch. They're supposed to be us. This is one of the disconnects that we see with our political establishment is they're not really like us anymore. They're part of a high elite class that really has no understanding of the average American life, and so they can't really. It's like the WEF. It's like, they will eat the bugs and live in the pods, own nothing, and be happy. It's like, no, screw you. You eat your own bugs. I'm gonna eat a nice juicy steak, and there ain't a dang thing you're gonna do about it. Our government does not have an obligation to make us safe. They have an obligation to, give us life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We have an obligation to do the things that we ought to do for our own flourishing. Our government is supposed to ensure human flourishing, and I think we've extensively detailed how coerced safety is not going to do that. Legislation, policy for safety is not going to work that way. I mean, and we know, you and I know especially, that, the government doesn't work the way it used to work, because a lot of the authority of interpretation of policy is passed on to the bureaucracy and to regulations and committees. So they might pass a great policy, but over time, that policy will be enforced by men, it'll be corrupted by men, and it will be kind of stretched and wrinkled by men who want their own power for themselves. So our government, I'm not somebody who says that we should have a small government, because that doesn't work. But we should have a limited government that has supreme authority over the things in which we give it the authority to do. And we have an obligation as a citizenry to decide what exactly do they have authority over. And I think regulating somebody's safety will never work. For the same reason that an overbearing parent creates a rebellious child, so will the government.
Mhm. I definitely agree that you should value freedom more. And again, shout out all the new people who showed up. Appreciate you, Grandpa. He put his Twitter at as WH Grandpa. Probably gonna have to give him a follow, but he also says don't follow me. But you put it there, so I kind of have to follow you. To in due time, that's what's gonna happen regarding that. But I agree that freedom should be more valuable. Now, I wouldn't make the statement that the government is not obligated to keep us safe. I disagree with that notion. I do think there's a certain level of obligation. For example, that's why
Yeah,
we have a
that
military,
yes,
right?
yes, 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 yes.
So, but with that said, I do think they should value the people's freedom above all else. That should be the main function of the decisions they make, is the people's freedom over their safety, which kind of begs the question of the conversation on, should the government be telling people not to take drugs, for example? I think that is the most interesting conversation, because obviously there's like limitation. There's like not limitation, but they're like I guess thresholds of when you can do certain things for like alcohol, right? You have to be 21 to drink. You have to be 16 to get your license. You have to get 18 to vote. All of them have these certain type of like age requirements. Wait until you're an adult basically before you can do X, Y, Z. You know what? Fair enough. I'm not too mad at that. But the conversation of like indulging in substances, and certain substances you indulge in are illegal, that is a very interesting conversation, because at that point, shouldn't they have the freedom to use whatever substance they want to? Like, if they, at the very least, there's two ways you could think about it, because I think the only argument that I heard that is low key valuable, which is why drunk driving is illegal, is the concern of the public safety. But at that point, the next part of the argument would be, okay, should it be legal for them to use whatever substance they want in their own home? And then there's another discussion based after that, should suicide be illegal?
Yes.
So at those points, I can see religiously why you would say,
Well,
but in terms of the government's power, should they enforce these things? So we'll start one by one. We'll start with the drugs portion first. Should all drugs be legal once you're of age? At the very, so whether it's on a public space or in your own home, away from all the people.
yeah, no, I don't think that people should be able to sell heroin legally at like over the counter or at a dispensary, whatever it might be. No, all drugs should not be legal. I misspoke when I said the government um, has no obligation to ensure our safety. Obviously, it does. That's why we have police. That's why we have the military. Um, so yeah, because firstly, drugs they are damaging to human life. And so selling drugs, I mean, it's on a far different scale than even alcohol or tobacco or whatever it might be. Um, the positives to
I'm
negatives
not
are
even talking about selling drugs because I think there's an actual like case of when you're selling something harmful to someone else that's inflicting harm, but just taking is
yeah.
different.
Well, obviously somebody has to sell the drugs, right?
Yeah, but
So
the two charges will be different regardless. Someone selling versus someone taking.
yeah, that's true. But yeah, drugs should be illegal because they are damaging to people. Um, So, by the nature of saying that drugs are legal, it would also be legal to sell them. And one of the reasons they aren't is because of the onus put on both parties in that transaction. There's an onus on the person to not willfully cause harm or even knowingly cause harm to another person, and there's also the problem of doing something to yourself that's harmful. There's a reason why suicide is a bad thing, and it's the same reason that doing drugs is a bad thing, because human life is implicitly valuable. And so to detract from that, to damage that, is it's a bad thing. And so that's the same reason for why suicide is a bad thing. There are some religions that would say if you commit suicide, you might not get into heaven. I don't believe that to be true at all. Because my only qualification to get into heaven is the blood of Jesus Christ. That's the only reason I get to go to heaven, because Jesus died for my sins. That doesn't matter what those sins are. Anybody that believes in Jesus will go to heaven. Believe in the real Jesus. I want to stipulate like that he died, was the Son of God, and rose on the third day. Those are It is grace and grace alone that gets me salvation. So, cause I don't want to make that religious, because a lot of people will say when you're making a religious argument against suicide, it's because if you commit suicide, you don't get to heaven. I don't believe that at all.
I've
But
definitely heard that.
I do make the religious argument that because it is a fundamentally religious claim to say that human lives are valuable because they're human lives. Because if we come from evolution, then there isn't any particular discrepancy between humans and animals, because some animals like dolphins have this higher form of intellect and communication and a quasi form of consciousness that's not quite like ours but could be like ours with a couple million more years, because they believe that consciousness is an evolved thing. That means that human life is not valuable in and of itself. And so it's not wrong to commit suicide. It's not wrong to do drugs. It's not wrong to kill babies. It's not wrong to do any of these things. That is my argument for why certain things should not be allowed, because human life is worth protecting. It's worth preserving and worth defending.
Hmm. Uh, this is very interesting. I've always thought about this. I've thought about this in depthly in terms of when it comes to the drugs and suicide thing. And before I get to that, shout out to Grandpa and his fam over there. We got over
Oh, wow.
140 people right now
Nice.
checking out the stream. Appreciate you, of course. Yeah, check out the podcast. That's what we do. Have great conversations all the time. Monday, Thursday, live, 8 p.m. EST. But with that said, also to address as someone said, taking from a seller is participating in the crime. It is, but I think my point is that there's a difference between selling it versus doing it yourself. I think these are two different actions and should be treated differently, and they are treated differently. But with that said, the reason why, in terms of human value, I'm fine with you having that position. Morally, I understand it, even if I'm not religious, because I think that morally there is value to human, and you should value your own. You should value your life. Now, when it comes to the government, though, that begs the question, because the government's decisions inherently are not decisions based on morals. They're decisions based on what is right for the country as a whole. And initially, I think we both agree that the government should value people's freedoms above all else, right? Not freedom and no safety, but like freedom more than safety. That's the point. So the question on them making it illegal for you to take drugs, which will be harmful for your body, but the reason why they take drugs, it gives them a type of bliss that they gives them some type of bliss for their life, even though it's momentarily, making them escape the realities of what is currently going on. And that, based off their own perception of what they're doing, is experiencing freedom, because the current life is nothing but freedom at that point in time. That's just based off their own perspective. And then in terms of, we'll start with that, and then we'll go into the suicide stuff part. So if a person thinks that, and the government is taking a step and saying, no, we are infringing on your freedom at that point, what's the real argument for the government to do said action? Because at that point, they're not valuing that person's freedom.
Because the reason that they can do that is for a couple of things that I'd like to say. Firstly, one of the issues that we have in our government is not making moral decisions. That's one of the problems, because either morals are true or morals are false. That's kind of the nature of morals. Just as in one, like I had a conversation with a lady today who said, I'm this religion, but I don't judge other people's religions because they can believe in whatever religion that they want. It's like, well, if you really had a conviction about your religion, then you would understand that all religions claim exclusivity. Not all religions can be true at the same time by the nature of the religion. Just as one of the problems with our culture is the moral relativism, that any given person's set of morals can be true at any given time. But that's a contradiction in logic. It doesn't even make sense to think that. That is why not everybody's freedom can be of the same primacy. Because if your value of freedom is to go and do drugs on the streets, that is not the purview of the government, is not to ensure people's fleeting happiness. It is to allow for their flourishing. And no one will flourish while stroked out on cocaine and heroin on the streets in California. That is a level of freedom that crosses the boundary. That's the football player going into the sidelines. That's the football player running up into the stadium. So that is not the kind of freedom that the government should, nor is supposed to, nor ever intended to protect.
So I would have to add on it. I'm really just playing devil's advocate, because I'm not really I'm I'm questioning the drug argument more so than having a real stance on it. I'm still kind of contemplating it in terms of their role. Ultimately, if I had to make a decision morally, I would say no, you shouldn't be taking harmful drugs. The problem I'm having is making sure I have the proper line so I can make sure I'm applying the logic unilaterally. So the next part, in terms of the fleeting happiness aspect of it, would lead into, in my opinion, fast food, right? So in fast food, it obviously is a very unhealthy
Yes.
and tastes really good. But the ultimate,
No one will ever convince me that Taco Bell tastes good. Tastes like trash.
you're a drug. Taco Bell, I love Taco Bell. No, especially the nacho fries. Do not disrespect Taco Bell like that. Oh,
The nacho
I be
fries are
eating
the
Taco
worst
Bell.
thing on their menu.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. We might have a heated debate after over
No,
this.
I'll be honest. I've never had the nacho fries, but I've
Oh,
seen them
they are
and they
fire.
look gross. No, they're
Oh,
steak fries. Steak fries are from Satan.
no,
Steak
they
fries
are
came
not
after the fall.
steak fry. They are their
They're
seasoning is
thick.
better.
No. They're
with
thick.
amazing seasoning, and then you add the nacho cheese sauce. Oh my goodness, it's peak fries, bro. Anyway, so the thing with fast food, and then the next point of it, about it that people kind of deliberate on is video games. So in these situations, inherently these are entertaining, they provide some type of fleeting happiness, but the overindulgence of both of those things leads to very unhealthy and very either depressing or very potentially damaging, and could lead to like one of the leading causes of deaths in America, as we know, are stuff like diabetes, heart disease, stuff like that. So when it comes to drugs, they are fleeting as well. If you overindulge, it'll cause you to potentially die. But why can't I use it a couple times a year?
Because so here's the thing. That's a great theory, but that's never how it happens, right? Everybody starts by saying, "Oh, I'll just use it. I'll just try it once or twice." Um, but then it never ends up that way, right? So that's a great thing to say that, "Oh, well, it's possible that some people will only want to use it once or twice a year," but it never does. That's never how it actually happens in reality. Just as if many things work in theory, but they don't pan out in reality because it's the nature of drugs to make you want more over time. It might take a time of like 10 years for somebody to get hooked on drugs, but there's also, another matter that we could bring in that at this point, with the levels of fentanyl that has saturated our society, it might only take once or twice to kill somebody. So there's that as well. Like there's a statistic that drug use in schools is going down, but that's actually because the students are dying because they're taking drugs laced with fentanyl, and so there's just fewer drug using students to take the drugs, and eventually we'll see a surge where it goes back up and drug rates get higher again. But as of right now, it's going down because the drug using students are dying. So that I wouldn't say that's a good outcome. That like, oh
No, no,
yeah,
no.
we have fewer students. That was a side note. That was a side note.
No, I understand. So you're making a good argument in terms of the addictiveness of said drugs, of course, right? And then if you make that comparison to fast food and video games, inherently those two things do not make you addictive. It can be addictive, but that's more related to,
So
dopamine and
I would
overindulgence
make
of said things. But there are drugs, like marijuana, for example, that inherently aren't addictive. So would you be okay with certain drugs over other drugs, as long as they don't have those addictive properties? Also, shout out to everybody who liked, because Grandpa said put one if you like. Shout out everybody who liked. And this person said drugs referring to just street drugs as opposed to the synthetic BS the pharmaceutical companies put out. There are natural remedies that work better that our bodies were designed to use and process. I don't really take either, but I prefer my natural body and antibodies. But go ahead.
So a couple things. Firstly, I would not put video games in the same category because I do think some video games are very good, and are even like encroach upon the levels of art. I think there's some video games that are very masterful and can be edifying. Um,
You don't think fast food and drugs can be masterful and edifying?
I do not. I do not
Oh
put those in the
man,
same category. I
oh that's
think
tough.
a nice Chipotle burrito, though, that is. But no, I understand the argument. The one difference, the one discrepancy that I think is nobody needs drugs to stay alive. To stay alive, we do inherently need food to stay alive. Fast food might not be the best food, but it is still food. And this is one of the reasons that the impoverished class is obese at much higher rates than our wealthy people, because the food that they can afford, it's keeping them alive, but it's fast food, and they're not mitigating it well with other forms of activity and exercise that they might maintain their weights better. But the thing is, the government could, levy taxes on fast food corporations to make their food healthier. But then the problem is going to be it's harder for the fast food companies to get, and so then they're going to raise the prices up, and then there'll just be something else to replace them that's even more unhealthy and all those sorts of things. Anyways, so that's why fast food shouldn't be illegal because right now it is a means of keeping people alive still. People are now using certain drugs to help with pain levels, but they don't need the drugs to stay alive. That's the difference. Same thing with video games. There's certain video games that I would totally be okay with banning because they're just degenerate filth.
Got any
And
examples? I feel like that came from
nobody
somewhere.
needs. No, I don't. I just know that there are like I've never
Oh,
played
because if
the
you
game.
were about to say Grand Theft Auto, you would have been hung. Like you would have been
No,
GG's.
no, I would. I've heard that Grand Theft Auto is like trash, and that's a game that I feel like nobody needs to play. But I never played it.
The mechanics are they're too revolutionary for people not to play it.
What are mechanics?
In the sense that you can create like role playing scenarios in the game, and you can kind of do whatever
Okay.
you want. So it's
Yeah, and
like,
you can just like go around and rape people and murder people and all that sort of
well, I
stuff,
don't
right?
think. No comment. Anyway,
Ha,
it, it allows you to live as degenerate as
but
possible in a
didn't you say?
simulated
Wait, didn't you
area.
say I would be GG's if I said ban?
Grand Theft Auto. Oh, there's a,
Yeah,
people love Grand
is
Theft Auto,
GG
bro.
is GG's a good thing or a bad thing? I thought
Bad
that was
thing.
a good thing. That's like good game. Like you said,
Oh,
GG,
you
good
gotta,
game.
you gotta, you gotta get with the slang, bro. GG's is like, oh man, it's been nice knowing you. Basically, how it's nice knowing you. GG's. That's
That
a
makes
different
less
way to
sense.
use it. Hey man, he's not with the slang. He's not with the slang. I can't help it, bro. I can't
No.
help it. Um, but overall, I think a lot of what you're saying is very fair. From what it sounds like from me, from what you're saying, is that the government should take an active part to, um, prevent not preventing, but like making sure that people aren't dying is the best way I'm going to put that is the making
I
sure that
also
people aren't dying and to an extent. And I think there's value to what you're saying because at the end of the day, the government shouldn't want their people to die.
mhm,
So
mhm.
I definitely get that sentiment.
Yeah. I
So
want to point something
go ahead.
out if real
Go ahead.
quick. Nellen Ray said she spent 20 years under doctor care and drugs for epilepsy and seizures continued constantly and stopped the drugs and started marijuana. And this has stopped them all completely seizure free for 8+ years. That's amazing. And that's one of the things that I said certain drugs used in the correct manner can certainly assist people. And I am totally pro using those kind of things for the
Pro
betterment.
marijuana? So you're gonna
I
vote
have,
it? Hey, let's get
well,
back in here, Ohio,
I,
bro.
I know medical marijuana is a great thing,
Uh,
but
okay.
most people are not smoking marijuana so that they don't have seizures from epilepsy. Most of them are doing it, to
To
go out in a blaze
buy,
of
bro.
glory. And most people who use medical marijuana aren't smoking it either. And those that are smoking the marijuana for medical reasons, I don't think they should do that. There's a much healthier, better way to ingest the benefits of marijuana. Also, there's somebody else who said we have to go back to growing our own food, vegetables, chickens, beef, etc. And that's true. Correct.
It's a lot of work, though. I'm not gonna lie, you gotta have the land and you have to have the time. But with
Correct.
that said, a great thought just popped in my head. What's the difference between drugs and alcohol?
Are you asking me what's the difference between drugs and alcohol?
Yeah, so it's kind of same principle in terms of drugs and alcohol, and it kind of fits the threshold where it's a fleeting happiness. And in terms of we saw what happened when they tried to ban alcohol. It didn't really work out very well.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
in as a government, would you ban alcohol? Not thinking about the repercussions, but based off the principles you just elicited. The repercussions are we already know what happened.
I would say no because um it takes a lot more alcohol, I think. Well, hang on a minute. I don't want to be
See, the thing for
So
me
okay,
when it
so here's the thing, like, because
go for it.
when people make the comparison between drugs and alcohol, they're really comparing one drug. They're comparing marijuana to alcohol because all other drugs are not comparable to alcohol because they destroy your life with rapidity. To which alcohol takes a lot more of it to do that. It only takes one huff of cocaine or one huff of whatever form you're ingesting it in, whatever, and you could be addicted for life. Nobody takes one sip of alcohol or a beer or even like a bourbon or a vodka or a wine and like, man, I'm hooked on this for life, baby. Nobody does that. But you
Which is why
inject
I said the addictive nature is a big part, from what it sounded like, the addictive nature. But I guess if you knew that someone is prone to an addictive substance that they will get hooked on and then ruin their life for, would you automatically make that illegal for that person?
No, because that's ridiculous and that's out of the purview of the government to be specific to Jonathan Coots. You, sir, are never allowed to have alcohol. That is tyrannical. That's it's not authoritarian. That is dictatorial and tyrannical. That's exactly what the government should never be allowed to do is say this person's social security number 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9. You are never allowed to have this. Make sure that they never get it. That's way outside the purview of the government.
So, Grandpa, I definitely see what you're saying. Grandpa said, Riddell, Purple Political Breakdown. Notice the things you tend to overlook. Friends, read the fine print. No, I definitely hear what you're saying. I'm just kind of asking questions at this point. And he said, Jonathan needs to give us more info. What exactly? Let us know what you're referring to. He said, Riddell and Jonathan, I like the suit and tie look. You know, we out here. We're looking professional. That's what we do out here. Someone also said something interesting a little bit before. Someone said I tried pot but didn't like it. I'm like Clinton. I did inhale. Okay. Other people I know smoked marijuana, never gotten anything else. It's the person. And someone else said, when the
So
government allows marijuana use more, and maybe you should question why the hybrids have gotten so far from the Cheech and Chong. I feel like it's racist. I don't know. I don't know what
So
he
one of
means
the
by that.
things,
Days.
yeah, and a lot of people are saying that, their grandpa was an alcoholic. Some people said that, drunk drivers,
Oh,
they
also gonna bring up
grandpas,
gambling
people.
too, because a lot of big people
Um,
kind of complain about gambling as well.
I would I would note for a lot of people, obviously, obviously, drunk driving is horrible. I deal at the court with drunk drivers every day. What a lot of people don't know, is there are also the same amount of people who are coming through the court and they've ingested marijuana. That's why the law was changed from drunk driving to operating a vehicle under the influence. People who are on prescribed medications can get charged with OVIs as well. Um, I don't want to sound like I'm defending drunk drivers, but I'm saying people are use that very commonly as an argument for marijuana and against alcohol by saying drunk drivers. But it's you can be just as impaired and get the same charges if you're using marijuana because they're both depressive. Marijuana and alcohol are depressive substances, and so they cause your emotions to be slurred and slow. Um, so the drunk driver argument is one that is equally afflicted both. Um, it's a great reason to make sure that both of them are restricted, not simply one of them. The difference is their benefits are different in kind. The benefit to marijuana is physically it can be beneficial with the CBD and other active components of marijuana can be good for the physicality of a human person. It's good medicinally. Alcohol actually also has some medicinal purposes that they use. Alcohol is a cleansing thing if you pour it over a wound. People use it to rejuvenate people out of shock. That's what it was used classically in the past for many, many years. But it's good in the social aspect. People who socially, and Riddell, you might be able to correct me on this. Um, People who socially smoke pot usually smoke pot and then just chill on a couch and watch a movie and eat Cheetos. How wrong am I, Riddell? Is that
Most people just be chilling out. I know a lot of
yeah?
people that be chilling out. I'm
But
gonna have
the oh,
were you
go
about to
ahead.
say something else?
Yeah, people who socially drink are having, at least in my experience, there's obviously people who just get blackout drunk, and that's also wrong. But people who
Yeah,
socially drink, like at my I ride at my pastor's house on Sunday nights,
I do both over here. Not
when
gonna lie.
we have like Scotch passed around stuff, we have very invigorating and edifying conversation. People typically don't do that when they smoke weed. They kind of edge out.
They talk about very 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 abstract stuff. Whereas like when you're drunk, you're just feeling good and you just talk. You just whatever comes out just comes out.
Yeah, but that's why
Uh,
you shouldn't get drunk, right? You have a drink, and then you kind of
get the
with
buzz.
one drink you get a little bit invigorated, and you can have very edifying, good conversation. When you blaze up a joint, typically you like, dude, what is life? And nobody's edified because nobody remembers it afterwards, anyways.
Few things that people said. Christine was said women love well dressed men. Shout out to well dressed men
Darn right
over
they
here.
do. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Shout out. Someone else said something that was very interesting. Tommy Chong, not racist. It is his last name. Sorry. Yeah, I wasn't saying you're racist. I was kind of joking, but thank you for correcting me. And then Gramp said, "We see you represent Purple Political Breakdown. Jonathan only seems to represent his name. You both have name banners on your videos. Nothing nefarious, just inquiring about Jonathan." Okay. Yeah, I had that before, and I was on someone else's show, and I forgot to change it. So next time we're gonna put Riddell, host, Jonathan,
Yeah,
co-host, Paul when he comes on, co-host, or we'll just not put any of it, and just have our names. Either is fine, honestly. Um, so there's a lot of things that was very interesting that brought up. You know, you brought up the drug stuff, and we brought up the gambling, alcohol as well, and a lot of kind of fine line points that I think I agree with is like one of the addictiveness, the absolute addictiveness that we should point out, because obviously there are certain things that people are prone based off like their dopamine levels and how they're able to kind of once they feel good about something, how attached they are to said something, or obviously after a period of time they also get attached based off their dopamine levels. So those are not absolute addictive things. Those are things that are addictive to a person who has an addictive personality. Two different things. So those are very good distinctions to make. Absolute addictive things are things that are designed to be addictive, which is like part of its DNA, I guess what I'm gonna put it when it comes to like drugs and how they're created chemically. So I definitely understand that they're designed to wire your brain in a very certain way to get you hooked. So that's a very good reason to keep them away because the end of the line of said using drug is ruin your life. The goal of the drug is to ruin your life. Um, it makes you feel good. It gets you addicted. You keep on using it. You ruin your life. That's a good distinction to make. And the government based on what how everything was explained from Jonathan's point of view, and I think I'm in line with that, is that freedom should be the most valuable thing when creating policies and looking at its people. But safety, the portion of safety that should be involved is, making sure that people are just not dying, right? Caring about the well-being of the people at the end of the day is a portion, and not wanting them to ruin their lives because of an addictive drug or not wanting them to kill themselves for whatever reason is a very valid reason for the government to be involved. So I guess after we get those two out of things out of the way, the at that point we're gonna have to gauge the safety aspect of the government's involvement because there is a realization that there are certain substances and things in American society that can be problematic based on their use. And some people talked about it inside the chat in terms of gambling and alcohol. Some people said there's certain taxes on it. There's a reason why cigarettes and their price and their tax have gone up, and alcohol in the same way. I don't know about gambling. Gambling's a little bit more trickier area for me. I don't really know all the ins and outs in terms of government involvement with gambling necessarily, but they did make sports betting legal, so I'm very curious on how much they're involved in all of that stuff. But at that point, we realize that there are certain things taken to its absolute, such as gambling, such as alcohol, such as fast food. When we realize that all of these three things can be addictive. They're more prone to addictiveness. Now, their DNA, not necessarily. Now, there are arguments based off the machinery of gambling slot machines, based on the colors of slot machines, based on the flavor of certain foods and certain chemicals in foods, and based off like certain things in alcohol that they're not necessarily wired to make you addictive, but they are just more addictive than another substance. So in these situations where we have these things that are purposely created in a way that can make someone more addictive, especially once they're feeding on the addicts, because that's how they make their money. They make their money off addicts, or people who need the substance, such as people who are poor and that are getting a lot of fast food. At that point, what is the government's role in these situations when their life is not necessarily in danger, but there's an obvious concern for their well-being based on things that we, for the most part, know are going to ruin certain people's life based on how they're designed?
Yeah, I still don't think that falls under the purview of the government. That is the responsibility
Interesting.
of, I think that falls under the responsibility of a community to come together and assist that person. And the reason it's not the government's role is because you know what else is highly addictive? It doesn't really cause damage, but can cause certainly at this point financial distress is coffee. You know, how many
Grandpa, run
people
it through. Grandpa, run it through. Go ahead. I had to answer him real quick. It was a very special show. Well, wasn't expecting it, but a very special show.
yeah. Um what was I saying?
You said
My
coffee.
brain, my brain's getting scrambled. Um coffee, you know, you go to Starbucks, you spend $8 for a cup of black coffee pretty much. And so that's very financially distressing at certain times. But the government should have no role in saying that. If somebody is concerned that I drink too much coffee, I don't want the government telling me that. I want my friends, my family, my community to come to me. If I have a trouble with gambling, I don't want the government to show up and say, "You, sir, once again, social security number XYZ, you are no longer ever allowed to gamble." Because certain people can go to casinos their whole lives and never really be addicted. They could just enjoy it. And people could be addicted to the strengths of things. My dad has known people that have been addicted to Advil. There's no psychologically active addictive, or there's no chemically addictive component of Advil, but what people can be addicted to is behavior and the feeling that they get on this thing. The people who get addicted to Advil get addicted to the feeling of not having that kind of soreness. And they'll take way too much Advil on a daily basis and they become addicted to it. Just like certain people, there's nothing inherently addictive in the chemical components of weed, but people can get addicted to the feeling of being on weed. People can be addicted to any number of things that aren't necessarily addictive. Is the government going to come in and stop each and every one of them? And like, just think
Well,
about the
the
strain on
question
research
here is
that would have.
them not stopping the people from doing said action, but being involved in terms of the moderation of said action.
You know, certain things are good to moderate, I guess. So yeah, I could say that maybe the government should have some slight role in the moderation, but it certainly shouldn't be the federal government. It'd have to be state governments.
It's a very interesting thing because another example is social media, right? The overuse of social media. And I'm not even necessarily saying that the government should be involved and should stopping all these things, but it makes things very interesting in terms of their role in these scenarios. And I guess the potential thing that you may have to bring up when it comes to these situations is, could you create technologies in a way to kind of mitigate all of the potential damage that these things may endure on the people? And when it comes to like, it's hard for me to say that in terms of like alcohol, in terms of anything you absorb or like eat or drink or whatever, it's hard for me to say there's anything there necessarily. Video games and gambling, like there's certain components that makes it very like addicting in a way to kind of keep on playing. No, it's just very tough especially when you see a lot of people kind of use it all the time. Like there's a whole, I don't know if you're part you're I don't think you've been paying attention to like the social media landscape, but there's a whole like war, I guess, in terms of the streaming platforms, because a lot of
Mhm.
people on Kick, right? Kick is
Yeah.
sponsored by stake.com, I think that's what they're called. And they're like
Steak
a
that.
I think that's what it's called, and they're like a gambling service, right? And a lot of people on Kick kind of
Oh
gambling.
yeah.
A lot of people kind of endorse gambling in a way, and there's a lot of disapproval for that. But inherently, because on Twitch you can't, they stopped it. It's like, oh, you can't do it on our platform, and then Kick was created. Now you can do it on their platform. So at that point, it's like, okay, who's necessarily in the right or wrong? If they want to gamble, they want to gamble. Like the arguments against it is, okay, but all these people may get addicted and all this stuff, and but at that point, it's like that's their decision, right? If I'm telling people, or and then I guess the other part about it that people were upset about is because most people who watch these streamers are kids, right?
Mm,
And I think we already, I mean, I think we already kind of or agreed in the sense that age limits are fine, but that's been a big controversy in terms of streaming services when it comes to like exposing certain material to people because of potential harm
yeah.
is a big debate topic. So we are going to wrap up soon. This is probably one of the longest episodes that we've done. Of if anybody has any final questions or any final things they want to say before we wrap up, please let us know. But we definitely appreciate WH Real Grandpa for coming in, bringing in all the people who came to talk and have conversations and came to support the channel. And hopefully, you guys support the podcast here as well. Purple Political Breakdown is the podcast. And at the end of the day, the message, the core theme of why this podcast exists, I'm going to say it again, is we are focused on actual solutions. We are focused on having genuine conversations and discussions about some of the most important topics in our society. And we don't really care about political bias on this channel. We don't really care about the toxic political debates that really go nowhere. If you have a different perspective, the only way you're going to find a solution from the other side of the aisle is if you talk it out and find some type of compromise. So we have a lot of different perspectives on this show. I kind of ride the middle for the most part. As you can tell from Jonathan, he's much more conservative, leaning on the right. We have another co-host who leans on the left. His name is Paul. And we have a lot of great guests that come on the show as well and share their solutions, share their piece, share their conversations. So, yeah, appreciate everybody who came and supported us for this,
Absolutely.
show. We are again live every Monday and Thursday, 8 p.m. EST is when we're live, and the shows drop at 8 a.m. EST for all the audio shows that launch on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anything else. So, any last words for you, Jonathan?
No, I appreciate everybody coming. It makes it. I think it makes it way more fun when we can engage with an audience. I think this really added a nice component to the show, so I appreciate everybody that comes.
Yeah, I definitely agree. We're just getting started for the most part. We're a pretty fresh podcast as of right now, and we're just growing from here. So appreciate you helping on that growth, Grandpa. And when it comes to the conversation we had in terms of freedom and safety, I think the basic ideas behind what was discussed from my point of view at the very least is that both are very valuable. Obviously, you can't have absolute freedom, you really can't have absolute safety. Both of them leads to ruin. There's a big nuance on how both should be kind of valued based on the perspective and situation you are in. People should be allowed to be the individuals they are and express their own individual freedom, but don't discount the safety that we all want for ourselves, for our kids, which is probably the most important part, the safety of our kids, and so they can live their own freedom as they grow up. So we're going to see how that keeps on going, and keep your eyes open and your ears open as well for potential measures that try to disguise them as safety measures but are potentially ways to take away the freedoms that we're talking about. So keep your eyes open for that. I hope you guys enjoyed. Of course, rate it 5 stars on Apple and Spotify. Check out the website, www.purplepoliticalbreakdown.com. And if you want to reach out to me, you can email me. Let me know what you thought about the show, or if you want to be on the show in the future, or just contact us for whatever reason. And you can email me at thetrendgoldandfaith@gmail.com. Hope you all enjoyed. Y'all have a good one. Take care and peace.
Well, check it out, y'all. We got what you need. We're all living in apartments, condos, vans. Well, dude, even you can have a studio in a box. Yes, we can help you with that right here at Blind Knowledge. We work on your budget, and we figure out your measurements. We'll get you the best sound for the best price. Let me know, 877-237-1143 or at blindknowledge.com. Yep.